My name is Jiangling. Before I fully came to, there was only one thing I remembered: cold. Not ordinary cold. This was the kind that seeped into your bones, the kind so deep you couldn't even feel your own body anymore. It was like I'd been trapped in a dream so long, so impossibly long, that I'd forgotten who I even was. Then came a sharp hiss. The sound was like some kind of mechanism unlocking. A wave of warm air rushed in from every direction, wrapping around my entire body. In that instant, all my numbed senses came flooding back at once, and my consciousness poured in like a rising tide. I opened my eyes. Darkness. Pitch black in front of me. That's when I realized I seemed to be sealed inside some kind of cramped, narrow space. Then the lid above my head began to slowly slide open. Blinding sunlight came pouring in, and I instinctively squinted against the glare. Through the haze, all I could make out was the silhouette of a person leaning down to look at me. "Oh, you're awake?" A clear, sweet voice reached my ears. It came from the figure standing over me. I blinked hard, and my vision slowly sharpened. The moment I saw clearly, I froze. Standing in front of me was a little girl. She had a messy head of white hair, wore a dirty, oversized outfit, and had a scarf wrapped around her neck. Her eyes were golden, but the strangest part was what sat on top of her head, a pair of round, protruding ears. Those ears, they looked like a mouse's? My mind went blank. But before I could even curse out loud, a wave of nausea surged up. I hunched over the edge of the container and threw up a mouthful of sour bile. Right after that, my stomach let out a loud, growling rumble. Fine. I still had no idea where I'd ended up, but one thing was crystal clear. I was starving to death. First things first, I needed to get some food in my stomach. "Are you hungry?" The little girl with the mouse ears spoke again, her voice soft and gentle, the kind that made it impossible to feel wary of her. I turned my head and saw she'd already pulled a handful of purple berries from inside her clothes, holding them out to me. "These are berries I just picked. Here, eat them." "Thanks." Honestly, at that point I was so hungry my legs were shaking. I couldn't care less whether these strange berries were even safe to eat. I just took them and stuffed them in my mouth. The sweet and sour juice burst across my tongue, and in that moment, I felt like I'd come back to life. I chewed a couple of times and swallowed it all down. Once I'd finally beaten back that gnawing hunger, I managed to pull myself up out of the container. I looked down at myself. I was wearing nothing but a blue shirt and a pair of shorts. The arms sticking out were nothing but skin and bones. Then I looked at the thing I'd been lying in. Pure silver, shaped exactly like a coffin, yet giving off some indescribable high-tech vibe. What the hell was this? A cryopod? I smacked my forehead. I'd fallen asleep in my crummy little rented apartment. How did I wake up inside some contraption like this? I looked back at the little girl in front of me. Even counting her ears, she barely reached my chest. Maybe 4'7" at most. My head was spinning even harder now. I fumbled for words for a long time before I finally managed to squeeze out, "Are you human?" She shook her head, giving me a look like I was an idiot. "I'm a rat." "Right. Guess that was a dumb question." I stepped out of the pod, and the second my foot hit the ground, I stumbled. The little girl reacted fast, catching me before I could fall flat on my face. Feeling the warmth from her body, I asked again, Where is this place?" She gave me an even stranger look. "This is the Edge World." "The Edge World." She tilted her head. "You really don't seem to know anything. How did you fall down here?" I don't know either." My temples were throbbing. I was just lying at home, minding my own business. I closed my eyes, opened them again, and I was in this pod. When she heard that, her expression suddenly shifted, and a hint of pity crept into her eyes. It wasn't until later that I understood what that pity meant. There's a saying around here: once you fall into the Edge World, there's almost no way you'll ever get back. "Oh, right." I steadied myself. "I'm Jiang Ling. What about you?" "Jiang Ling." She repeated my name carefully, twice, looking like the two syllables were a real struggle for her to pronounce. "I'm Clover." The moment she said her name, a cold, female voice suddenly rang out inside my head. "Host has been detected making contact with the first colonist. Edge World Colony Construction System, now activating. Right after that, a blue, transparent panel materialized out of thin air in front of me. On it was an enormous, real-time map. The area all around me, every blade of grass and every movement, was crystal clear. In the center of the map was a forest, Not far to the east stretched a wide plain. A little creek ran from north to south, and right where the water bent, there stood an abandoned little wooden cabin. Dead center on the map were two stick-figure characters, one a white-haired member of the Rat Clan, the other a black-haired human. The whole thing looked exactly like a giant video game interface. My heart skipped a beat. A system? Honestly, in that instant, I breathed a sigh of relief. At least it gave me a tiny bit of security in this terrifyingly unfamiliar world. Cautiously, I used my mind to poke at the little Rat Clan figure on the map. A small window instantly popped up on the panel. IV 3-leaf clover. Race, Rat Clan. Shooting, level 16. Combat, level 12. Cooking, none. Medical, level 11. Intellect, level 4. I more or less figured it out. The stars represented a person's natural talent and passion for a given skill, maxing out at 2 stars. The levels behind them could go all the way up to 20. After reading through the list, I lifted my head and glanced again at the thin, tiny little girl in front of me. A bit of sweat beaded on my forehead. This little squirt, shooting level 16, combat level 12? Then I opened up my own panel. Jiangling. Race, Homo sapiens. Shooting, level 0. Combat, level 3. Building, level 10. Social, level 12. Intellect, level 0. I fell silent. She had combat level 12. I had combat level 3. She had shooting level 16. My shooting was flat out level 0. And besides, why was my intellect 0? Had I traveled to the future only to end up as some kind of idiot? That cold female voice spoke up again. Intellect level depends on the host's knowledge and experience of this world. The host currently knows nothing about the fringe world, so intellect is 0. This does not mean the host's intelligence is below average. Fine. After hearing that explanation, I felt a lot better. Meanwhile, Clover was tilting her head, watching me curiously, those little mouse ears twitching. In her eyes, this big, tall man in front of her had suddenly gone quiet and started jabbing at the empty air like a lunatic, an inexplicable smile plastered on his face. Had this guy snapped and gone stupid? Honestly, that was not what she wanted to see. She'd survived one whole freezing winter all alone in this godforsaken place. She'd finally run into a human who could talk and didn't seem threatening. The last thing she wanted was for him to turn out to be useless. So she reached out with her little hand and waved it in front of my face. You okay? I snapped back to reality and looked at her. Are you still going to go pick berries? She nodded. The berries I stored are all gone. And the ones I just picked, you ate all of them too. Silently, she added a thought. Counting this big lug in front of her, she'd probably have to pick a whole lot more. You look like you don't know the first thing about anything, she said seriously. If you were out here on your own, you probably wouldn't last 2 days before you died. If you don't mind, you can stay with me for a while. Judging by the state of me, she genuinely didn't think I could survive out here alone. But she wasn't planning to just abandon me, either. I gave a couple of sheepish laughs. Then I'll be in your debt. To pay you back, let me come pick berries with you. After a moment's thought, I added, I can see the exact location of every berry bush around us. You can see where the berries are nearby. Her golden eyes lit up in a flash. What is that? Is it some kind of technology from your planet? I paused, then nodded. Yeah, that's right. It's technology from my planet. Calling the system technology wasn't really a lie, after all. After talking with her for a bit, my body had pretty much recovered, so I started leading the way. At the moment, we were walking through a stretch of woods. It looked like it had just rained. The dirt under our feet was sticky and slick. Along the way, I asked her plenty more about this world. The Fringe World, just as the name suggested, was a planet on the very edge of the entire universe. Few people, barren land, held together by settlements large and small. There was no government to speak of, no order at all. Most of the people living on this planet were colonists who'd fled from other worlds. Some were drifters whose homes had been destroyed, some were refugees escaping war, and others were scientists who'd come to survey the planet. So the level of technology here was all over the place, ranging from the cutting edge to the primitive. And precisely because everyone came from all corners, from different star systems, here you might run into anything. No strange or bizarre race was worth making a fuss over. The Cloverleaf Mousefolk were just one of them. As for what year it was now, the year 5500 AD. I glanced at the time on my system interface. Right now, it was the 7th day of Emerald in this particular year. Here, a year had only 60 days, divided into 4 seasons: emerald, crimson, amber, and pale, which lined up neatly with our spring, summer, fall, and winter. Each season lasted 15 days. It was still pretty cold, but I could just barely handle it. Following the route marked on the system map, it didn't take long before I led her to the nearest patch of berry bushes. There really are some. Cloverleaf, trotting along beside me, had a face full of delight. She went bounding over to pick the berries, and that thin little tail poking out from under her clothes swished back and forth. According to the map, there were several more berry patches like this one. Just the two of us could easily live off them for a good while. As for building some kind of colony, honestly, I didn't dare think that far ahead just yet. Right now, the most important thing was to get enough food to survive. I was about to step up and help when that voice in my head spoke up again. Unlocked. Decomposition function. Decomposition function automatically breaks down objects near the host into usable materials. Certain prerequisites must be met. Decompose. I paused for a moment, looked at the berry bush in front of me, and silently thought. System, use decompose. The instant the words formed in my mind, the entire bush was suddenly coated in a layer of white light. Cloverleaf jumped, darting in front of me in a flash. Out of nowhere, she'd produced a dagger glinting with a cold light, and she was staring hard at the bush. Watching her go into full battle stance, I nearly laughed. I reached out and gave her head a couple of gentle pats. Relax, this is just my, technology. Technology? She blinked. Right then, the white light dissipated. The whole bush vanished into thin air, leaving nothing but berries rolling all over the ground. At the sight of it, her face turned bright red in an instant. Clearly, she'd realized she'd overreacted. She put away the dagger, dropped her guard, and muttered under her breath, Don't touch my head. It's rude." Sorry. Smiling, I stepped forward, crouched down, and started gathering the berries. She quickly joined in too. This little girl. Normally, she came off as cold and distant, but the moment anything happened, every feeling showed right on her face. She was just like a kid. That contrast was oddly endearing. I quietly marveled to myself. The very first person I'd run into after crossing over into this world was her. My luck really wasn't half bad. Using the same trick, we cleared 2 more berry patches, and soon both of us had armfuls of fruit. For now, at least, we didn't have to worry about food. Cloverleaf cradled a big pile of berries, so happy her eyes narrowed into 2 crescent moons. She hummed some unfamiliar little tune the whole way. As I followed her back, I finally couldn't hold back the question that had been on my mind. Cloverleaf, why were you willing to take in a total stranger like me, someone you just met? Truth is, I wanted to ask this ever since I first opened my eyes here. By her own account, this fringe world was a lawless, chaotic place with no order. In a place like that, you'd think you'd keep your guard up around anyone. Because you don't look like a bad person, she said, giving her tail a light flick. And besides, you're unarmed and so weak you couldn't be a threat to me. Me? I glanced at her level 12 combat skill, then thought about my own pitiful level 3. Fair enough. I really couldn't argue with that. Most importantly, she added, living all alone is just too lonely. And colonists like you are hard to come by. Oh, so it was because she was lonely. Made sense. Humans are social creatures by nature. Then again, do mousefolk even count as humans? But come to think of it, mice are pack animals too. While I was mulling this over, she reached out and pushed aside a cluster of branches. Everything suddenly opened up before us. A wide, empty meadow stretched out ahead. We'd finally made it out of the woods. The winding little creek from the map was right there in front of us. On this side of the stream, standing in the grass, was a rundown little wooden cabin that looked like it had been abandoned for ages. Actually, I'd already spotted this cabin back when I'd been looking at the map. So this must be where she usually slept and stayed. I found this place by chance, she said, pushing open the creaky wooden door. For some reason, the original owner just left it behind. Works out for me. It keeps out the wind and rain. As she spoke, she walked inside and carefully piled her armful of berries in the corner. Following Cloverleaf into the abandoned cabin, I took another careful look around. There was nothing inside. No furniture, no decorations, just a little stash of food in the corner and a layer of dry grass on the floor for sleeping. and the place was genuinely cramped. It was barely wide enough for 2 adults. 2 people lying side by side in here would mean pretty much pressing against each other. To put it bluntly, the place was barely bigger than a bathroom. I set the fruit down and looked at Clover, then asked, a little unsure. So, we're just gonna sleep like this? Squeezed together. Honestly, after seeing this place, I'd already braced myself to spend the night outside. I mean, she was willing to take me in at all. I should just be grateful for that. Oh, right. My words seemed to jog something in her memory. She smacked her forehead and turned to head back out. With 2 people sleeping here, this little bit of hate definitely won't cut it. Let me go grab some more. Me? Okay then. Miss Clover seemed to have completely misread what I meant. But judging by her reaction, she clearly didn't mind squeezing in next to me at all. That was good enough. At least tonight, I wouldn't have to sleep outside. While she was out, I sat cross-legged on the ground and started poking around at this system of mine. I figured if it was called the Homestead Building System, it should at least give me some perks related to, building a homestead. And at the very least, couldn't it hand me a gun to defend myself? So while I was thinking, I started jabbing at the interface. And wouldn't you know it, I actually turned something up. Host detected descending into the RIM world. Rewards obtained. Basic workbench blueprint, skill trainer, melee, ×1. Detected that host colony now has a second colonist. Rewards obtained. Basic furniture blueprint, skill trainer, ranged, ×1. You piece of junk system. So unless I ask, you really won't just give me stuff on your own. After digging around for a while, I'd finally scraped up something useful, and I nodded, satisfied. The moment I claimed a blueprint, the crafting method was printed straight into my brain. The basic workbench blueprint covered things like a crafting table, a stone cutting table, and a butcher's table. The basic furniture blueprint had stuff like beds and bookshelves. And right as I unlocked those blueprints, my intelligence level went from 0 to 1. Didn't feel like anything special. Seemed like this thing was just tied to how much I actually understood about this world. Of course, knowing how to make something and actually having the materials were 2 different things. Those, I'd have to go find myself. Bottom line, when all was said and done, I still had to build everything with my own 2 hands. Then there were those 2 skill trainers. I looked at the description in my pack. Skill trainer, consumable. Using it grants experience toward the corresponding ability. Can be used by other colonists. Now, I'd been a law-abiding guy my whole life, so it went without saying that my worst abilities were melee and ranged combat. Melee was only level 3, and range was a flat 0. Might as well use them. With a flick of my mind, a small white cube appeared in my hand. A neat little square, pretty finely made. I turned it over and over but couldn't figure it out, so I finally asked, "System, how do I use this thing?" "Just attach it to the back of your head." I did as instructed and pressed it against the back of my skull. The instant it touched, the cube transformed on its own. Mechanical claws sprang out from its 4 corners and clamped onto the back of my head, fitting perfectly, snug as could be. Then came a faint prick of pain at the base of my skull. The next second, my eyes went wide. A flood of memories that absolutely weren't mine came pouring into my brain like crazy. The me in those memories was practically a martial arts master. Every move, every stance, radiated power and grace. Dodges, counters, all flowing together smooth as water, one seamless motion. By the time I came back to my senses, I'd fully absorbed those memories. My melee level had jumped from 3 to 5. Of course, my actual physical fitness hadn't changed one bit. My body was still exactly the same as when I'd first crawled out of the pod, skinny as a beanpole. At the end of the day, it was like they say, you can forge all you want, but the iron itself has to be strong. As for the used-up trainer, I set it down in front of me. This thing was single-use. Now it was just a dead brick. I thought for a moment, then reached out and tapped it. Breakdown. A flash of white light, and the trainer poof, scattered into a small pile of materials. I poked through it a couple of times. Iron, silver, and a few components. That's it. I did the same with the other trainer, the ranged one. Used it, broke it down, got the exact same pile of materials. And my ranged level rose to 3 in the process. Kind of hilarious, really. A guy who'd never touched a gun in his life was now level 3 in shooting. Just as I finished up, Clover came back carrying a big armful of hay. Perfect timing. There was something new I'd been meaning to run by her. She dropped the hay on the ground and looked up at me. Here, take a look. Is this enough? It's plenty. Thanks for the trouble. I didn't really care how much hay there was, and just spread it out. Noticing it was already dark outside, I asked her, "You got any plans for tomorrow?" Plans? She blinked and shook her head. If I'm out of food, I go find food. If I'm out of herbs, I go pick herbs. And I keep an eye out for anything useful along the way. Made sense. What kind of entertainment could there possibly be in a godforsaken place like this? Especially for someone like her, living all alone, there wasn't much to look forward to. Have you ever thought about, I asked her with a smile, building a new house? A new house? Her eyes lit up in a flash, but just as quickly, that spark dimmed again. I've thought about it, but I don't know how to build one. Say what you want, but Clover was still a girl. Telling me she didn't want to live in a new house would have been a lie. The problem was, her building level was only 3. If she hadn't gotten lucky and stumbled onto this abandoned wooden shack, she'd probably be sleeping out in the open every single night. I know how. I looked at her, dead serious. I can't promise anything fancy, but it'll definitely be more comfortable than this rundown shack. Before I got dragged into this world, I worked in civil engineering. The market had just been in bad shape those last couple of years. I got laid off before I'd even put in 2 full years. Couldn't find new work either, so I'd been holed up in my rented apartment, scraping by on unemployment checks and what little savings I had. And it was during that lowest point in my life that I somehow got yanked into this fringe world. Hearing me say all that, the expression on Clover's face slowly turned to one of anticipation. She didn't care one bit whether it was fancy. As long as she could have a new house, she'd be perfectly happy. Clover, if you're free tomorrow, come work with me. She nodded hard without a second's hesitation. Just tell me wherever you need me. We'll talk tomorrow. It's getting late. Let's get some sleep. As I said it, I couldn't help rubbing at my brow. Ever since I'd come out of that pod, my head had felt heavy and foggy. I'd held out this long, but I really couldn't take it anymore. Okay. Clover crawled into the shack and laid down in the farthest corner of the straw bed. I scratched my head. Sure, I'd already been dragged all the way out to this middle-of-nowhere place, but sleeping next to a girl for the first time still felt a little awkward. Whatever. She clearly didn't mind. I did my best to keep a little distance between us in that cramped space before finally settling down onto the straw. Yeah, really hard. Couldn't sleep. My mind was thick with exhaustion, but sleep just wouldn't come. Too much had happened in a single day. Getting dragged out of nowhere over 3,000 years into the future, tied to some fringe world, then saved by a little mouse girl, and getting bound to a homestead building system on top of it all. Develop a colony. How was I even supposed to do that? Was it just about recruiting more and more people? I was still lost in my thoughts when I suddenly felt something warm against my arm. I looked down. It was Clover, fast asleep, hugging my arm. Seemed like she'd sensed something warm beside her in her sleep and instinctively snuggled up to it. There was a faint little smile on her sleeping face. Looked like she was having a good dream. She really didn't have her guard up around me at all. I shook my head with a smile. She'd saved my life, and I didn't have a single thing worth scheming after. So I could trust her completely, no reservations. But me? What about me was worth this much trust from her? Looking at her sleeping face, all those tangled thoughts in my head somehow started to scatter, one by one. And before I knew it, I drifted off to sleep too. Maybe I just wasn't used to sleeping there. The next morning, the moment the sky started turning gray, I woke up. Clover was still asleep. I got up as quietly as I could, trying not to wake her. But her ears twitched a couple of times, and she blinked her eyes open, still half asleep. Is it morning? It just got light out. Go back to sleep for a bit, it's fine. I kept my voice low. But she shook her head and sat up. Early or late, it's all the same. Besides, aren't we building a house today? The second I stepped out of the shack, a cold gust hit me and made me shiver. Even now, all I had on was that one thin shirt. Clover trailed behind me, nibbling on a piece of fruit in tiny bites. She looked up and asked, "So, how are we going to build the house?" I didn't answer. I walked up to a tree, pressed my hand against the trunk, and silently said in my head, "Decompose." Only harvested timber can be decomposed. Just as I thought. I wasn't the least bit surprised. Back when I'd unlocked the decompose function, the system had said something about needing to meet prerequisites. Beside me, Clover had already finished her fruit. She looked puzzled. So we need to chop down trees? I nodded. Looks like we need tools first. Clover, do you have anything like an axe around here? I do, she answered, and then, whoosh, she darted off and vanished. A moment later, she came back carrying a beat-up old axe and held it out to me. Will this work? I found it while I was scavenging for food. I usually use it to chop firewood and start fires. I took the axe and gave it a heft. Honestly, by this point, I'd nearly forgotten I was in the year 5500. The primitive way of living, the crude tools, the wooden shack that couldn't get any more run down. Call it the future all you want, but I felt more like I'd been dropped into some ancient forest. That and the text cuts off. Sleep pods and skill trainers. That stuff at least gave me a little taste of futuristic technology. I turned around, hefted the axe, aimed at the tree trunk, and swung down with all my might. Bwong! A jolt of recoil shot up through the axe, rattling my whole body so hard I nearly flung the thing out of my hands. I looked down at my two skin and bones arms, still tingling from the impact, and couldn't help feeling both helpless and amused. Fine. I'd made this look way too easy in my head. Let me chop it, Clover said. She really couldn't stand watching anymore. She stepped up and took the axe from me. I silently handed it over and stepped aside to watch. Once my body's back in shape, I'm definitely going to start working out. Otherwise, this is just too embarrassing. Clover might have been small, but she was way stronger than me. In no time at all, crack, a big tree toppled to the ground. I perked right up and rushed over, slapping my hand on the fallen trunk. Decompose. In an instant, white light swallowed the entire trunk. When the light faded, there on the ground was a neat, tidy pile of lumber. Whoa, I hadn't expected the tree to break down straight into lumber. That wasn't decomposing, that was basically processing it for me. I picked up a piece of wood, thought for a moment, then said again, decompose. A flash of white, and the piece in my hand turned into a round ball. My eyes lit up. So this processed wood, I could break it down into any shape I wanted. That was going to make building a house so much easier. Clover stood there dumbstruck, unable to say a word for the longest time. But she caught on quickly. This meant building the house would be a lot less work. That excited spark returned to her face. I'll go chop down a few more trees. Great. Thanks. I'd already scooped up the lumber and was ready to get to work. There was no way I could build anything fancy, but as long as it beat that cramped, closet-sized shack and the frame could hold up the roof, that'd be good enough. The bit of iron I'd gotten from decomposing the trainer yesterday was just enough for the system to whip up a few nails. No hammer? No problem. I grabbed a rock to make do. Everything ready, I rolled up my sleeves and threw myself into the work. For a moment there, I almost felt like I was back at my old job. With the system giving me a boost, it only took half a day before the rough shape of the cabin stood upright. I'd never had much stamina to begin with, and after slaving away most of the day, I just plopped down beside the cabin, gasping for breath. Clover handed me 2 fruits, but her eyes stayed glued to the nearly finished house. Since I'd used what the system had processed, the whole cabin was a pale yellowish white, worlds better than that dead, dreary old shack. And the space inside was, no joke, several times roomier than that closet. I was already scheming in my head. I'd fix up that old ruin later and turn it into a bathroom. Right in the middle of that thought, I turned my head and caught sight of Clover's slender tail, hidden beneath her oversized clothes, wagging so fast it was practically a blur. Looked like she really loved the new place. Seeing her that happy made me feel genuinely glad, too. I wolfed down the fruits in a couple of bites, caught my breath, and stood up, ready to get back to work. Boom! A deafening explosion suddenly ripped across the sky. I looked up and saw a ball of fire blooming in midair, like something had just blown up. A fight breaking out up in the sky? Were the colonists at war with each other? Since when did battles reach all the way up there? As I was puzzling over it, I suddenly noticed something white shooting down out of that fireball like a comet, plunging straight into the woods not far from us. Right then, the system in my head blared out an alarm. Warning, fallen angel die. Fallen angel? I was completely lost. I quickly pulled up the system map, which let me look down on everything happening within about a half-mile radius. The moment the map opened, the first thing I spotted was, there in the woods, a strange-looking little figure had appeared. Huh, the thing that fell was a person? Something crashed nearby, Clover said, having seen the white light too. It happens a lot out here on the Fringe Worlds. Places like this, you can sometimes scavenge useful supplies. Want to go check it out? She looked up at me as she spoke. I nodded and followed her into the trees. Guided by the system map, the two of us quickly found the crash site. Even from a distance, we could see a deep crater with heat still steaming out of it. Clover threw out an arm to stop me, then crouched low and crept forward, poking her head over the edge to peer inside. The next second, she froze completely. Clover, what is it? Curious, I leaned in too, following her gaze down into the pit. And in that instant, I was so stunned I couldn't speak either. Come on. In the pit lay a girl so beautiful it didn't seem real. Her long, ice blue hair fanned out across the bottom of the pit like a blooming frost flower. She wore what looked like a researcher's white lab coat, but it was torn to shreds now, leaving large patches of snow-white skin exposed. But what really caught the eye were the wings on her back. A pair of white wings, so wide that when spread they were several times bigger than her whole body. She looked exactly like an angel out of legend. There was even a faint yellow halo flickering above her head. The only problem was, those wings were soaked in blood. So much crimson had bled into them that the pure white feathers were almost completely stained red. Actually, I'd already spotted those white wings and yellow halo earlier on the map, which was why the little figure had struck me as so strange. But the map couldn't show details of a face, so I never in a million years expected the thing that fell would turn out to be a total knockout. By now, I finally understood what the system had meant by fallen angel. Clover snapped out of it and was the first to jump into the pit, immediately starting to examine the angel's body. I hopped down after her. How is she? Badly hurt. Clover's expression was grim. Multiple fractures, too many external wounds to count, and her internal organs might be damaged too. She needs emergency care right now. Looking closer, I could see her body really was covered in wounds of all sizes, some so nasty that even I couldn't help but wince. Then again, I was just an ordinary guy who'd grown up in peacetime. I'd never seen a bloody scene like this more than a handful of times in my whole life. I turned my head, meaning to ask Clover whether we should save her. But the instant I turned, she was turning to look at me too. Xiangling, do you want to save her? Was she actually asking for my opinion? I glanced at the system panel, which had this angel's info displayed. Of course we'd save her. I couldn't pass up a chance to grow the colony. But I still needed to see what she was capable of first. If this angel turned out to be an even fiercer fighter than Clover, I need to take some precautions ahead of time. But the moment I scanned her panel, my worries evaporated. Lucia, Electra. Race, Malira. Marksmanship, level 6. Combat, level 3. Nothing special. Honestly, this angel seemed even more useless than me. But then I saw the last line of the panel, and my eyes shot wide open. Intellect, level 20. Level 20 intellect. Did I even grasp what that meant? Never mind me. Clover was incredibly capable, and her intellect was only level 4. Level 20, wasn't that basically a living, walking encyclopedia? What was there to hesitate about? I nodded. Save her. The words were barely out of my mouth before Clover was deftly getting to work, patching the angel up with a quick field dressing. Her medical level was a full 11, so when it came to saving lives right now, she was our only hope. There were no bandages or cloth on hand, so she just tore strips straight off the angel's lab coat. But the angel had so many wounds, and the coat was already in tatters. So I gritted my teeth and ripped both sleeves off my own shirt, handing them over to Clover. Only then did we manage to stop the bleeding. Once the worst of the gashes were bound up, I scooped the angel into my arms and ran with Clover back toward our base. Clover was stronger than me, but her small frame was a real handicap. This angel's enormous wings were too much for her, and she simply couldn't carry her. When I lifted her, I could clearly tell the angel's body was unbelievably light. But those wings, they were incredibly heavy. I honestly couldn't imagine how she went about her daily life dragging around wings that weighed this much. Then again, that meteor-like fall earlier meant she'd plummeted straight down from way up high in the sky. And surviving a fall like that, it meant this angel's physical durability was probably far beyond anything I could imagine. Back at the base, Clover immediately ran off to gather herbs, while I went ahead and stuffed the angel into the bathroom. No, not the bathroom. That abandoned wooden shack. Because of those wings, the rundown little shack that had barely fit both me and Clover was now almost completely filled by her alone. At a glance, it really did look like a coffin. I stood outside the coffin, staring for a good while at the pure white angel lying quietly inside. After thinking it over, I stepped forward, silently muttered sorry about this, and then reached out toward those flawless wings of hers. With a light tug, I plucked out a single snow-white feather. The angel just lay there, perfectly still, without the slightest reaction. I held the feather in my hand, turning it over and over as I examined it. Just like her massive wings, this one feather alone was as long as my palm. It felt especially soft to the touch, with a nice springiness to it. It would definitely make a comfortable blanket. At that thought, I glanced down at my own thin shirt. To save this angel, I'd torn off several pieces of the sleeves, and my shirt, which hadn't been warm to begin with, was now downright. It had become useless. Even a small gust of wind was enough to make me shiver. If things kept up like this, I'd definitely get sick. I needed to figure out how to get some clothes, and fast. The moment that thought crossed my mind, my eyes drifted back to the blood-stained clothing beneath the angel's white coat. Yeah, better not. After all, I was planning to bring this angel back into the colony. If she woke up and found her clothes stripped off, whatever trust she might have in me would drop straight through the floor. Fine. My body was tough enough anyway. I could tough it out a little longer. Just as I was thinking this, Clover came back carrying a big armful of herbs. The second she spotted me standing in the doorway shivering, she couldn't help but tilt her head. She walked over, looked up at me, and softly called out, "Jiang Ling." "Ah, Clover, you're back." I'd been lost in thought, and her voice snapped me out of it. I looked down at her. "What's up?" She stood on her tiptoes, as if suddenly aware of the height difference between us, and a slightly annoyed look crossed her face. She said, "Crouch down." "Huh? Oh." I nodded and crouched down as she asked. Without a word, she unwound the scarf from around her neck, stood on her toes, and wrapped it around my neck loop by loop. I froze, not moving a muscle, just quietly watching her wrap the scarf around me. In my whole life, the only woman who'd ever wrapped a scarf around my neck was my mom. Once she was done, Clover stepped back a couple of paces, a faint smile spreading across her little face. "This scarf, it's really warm." I reached up and touched the scarf around my neck. It still carried that faint herbal scent from her. Honestly, compared to the thin layer of cloth I was wearing, whether the scarf was warm or not didn't make much of a difference. But somehow, with my neck warm, my heart felt warm too. After getting the scarf on me, Clover turned around to go tend to the angel's wounds. I pulled the scarf a little tighter and asked her, "Clover, what about you? Aren't you cold?" She seemed especially sensitive to the cold. Nearly every bit of exposed skin was wrapped snugly in wool. "I'm fine. I've still got this snow coat," she said, pointing at the oversized garment she was wearing. "This thing's really warm. I made it through the whole winter thanks to it." A rain of white, as they called winter here. After saying that, she quickly added, "But I definitely can't give this one to you, okay? I really can't stand the cold. Don't worry, I wasn't eyeing your coat." Besides, even if she gave it to me, I couldn't fit into it. The coat was oversized on her, but on me, it would still be way too small. I turned my gaze back to the unconscious angel and asked Clover, "Do you know what race she is?" Actually, I'd known the angel's race the moment she appeared on the system map, Malira. It was just that the system had given me nothing but a bare name, no other information at all. Clover shook her head. "No idea. There are way too many races in the fringe world. I only understand this place halfway myself." Fair enough. Her intellect was only level 4, so it made sense she wouldn't know. By the looks of it, she'd only survived a single winter in the fringe world. As for what she'd been through before that, I had no clue, but I didn't plan on digging into it. Clover wouldn't hurt me. That alone was enough. As the sun slowly sank, I got back to building our little cabin while she tended to the angel. That rundown shack had already been taken over by the angel. And tonight, there was no way I was cramming back into that miserable place. This new cabin had to be livable before dark, no matter what. After a whole lot of work, I finally got the cabin built. I tossed aside the rock I'd been using as a hammer and plopped down on the ground. Wiping the sweat off my forehead, I looked at my handiwork. Hey, this design actually looked a bit like one of those lakeside cabins from an anime. I couldn't help but smile with satisfaction. Of course, since the whole thing, including the roof, was made of pure wood, it was guaranteed to leak in the rain. I'd fix that up gradually later. The window was installed too, With glass I'd pried straight off that busted little shack next door. It wasn't big, but it let in just enough light. I glanced at the horizon again. The sun still hadn't fully set, and a streak of evening glow still hung along the skyline. The sun wasn't even down yet. I felt like I'd been working the entire day. Could it be that a single day in the fringe world was different from what I was used to? But on second thought, since the fringe world was a planet at the edge of the universe, that sun up in the sky probably wasn't the same sun I knew either. That made sense. This place only had 60 days in a year, so there was no point stressing over these details. Staying alive first, that was what really mattered. Using the leftover lumber, I put together a bed. Well, more accurately, a bedboard. With no fabric or wool, a soft mattress was out of the question. My own clothes weren't even sorted out yet, so I'd just have to make do and sleep like this. By then, Clover had finally finished tending to the angel and came out of that little rundown shack too. The second she laid eyes on the finished wooden cabin in front of her, her whole mousy self froze right where she stood. After a long moment, she rubbed her eyes in disbelief. The pair of ears on top of her head twitched twice, and her eyes lit up as she looked at me. Our new house, it's already built. Seeing her reaction, I felt pretty smug. I made a deliberate after-you gesture and said, all cocky, "Take a look for yourself." She immediately bounced through the door. The place was empty, but that didn't dampen her excitement one bit. When she spotted the bed in the corner, those golden eyes of hers lit up like someone had switched on a lamp. There's even a bed. Without a second thought, she flung herself onto the bedboard and started rolling around on it. She looked exactly like a girl who'd been drifting her whole life and had finally found a home. I followed her inside and said, "It's still pretty bare in here. When we have time, we'll make some furniture to fill it out. Oh, and tomorrow I'm planning to haul back some rocks. See if I can turn them into stone material." Clover. Halfway through my sentence, I realized Clover, who'd just been rolling around on the bed a moment ago, had gone completely silent. I leaned in for a closer look. Wow. Her eyes were shut. Her breathing was steady. She'd actually fallen asleep. She really doesn't have an ounce of caution around me, does she? But she really had worn herself out today, so she might as well rest early. The moment that thought crossed my mind, I looked down at Clover on the bed, and my expression suddenly went stiff. I reached up and scratched my head. So the two of us could sleep together? I deliberately made this bed board a little bigger. But why didn't I just make two single beds? When I was building this double bed, that idea never even entered my mind. It was like, deep down, sleeping next to Clover just felt like the most natural thing in the world. Not that there was anything to agonize over. After all, I wasn't the one losing out here. Looking at the half of the bed she'd deliberately left open for me, I plopped right down without hesitation. Just like the night before, the moment she sensed something warm beside her, the sleeping Clover immediately snuggled into my arms, a peaceful little smile spreading across her face. I chuckled and stroked her soft white hair. Exhaustion and drowsiness quickly washed over my whole body. Time to sleep. Early the next morning, I opened my eyes and sat up on the bedboard. Clover was still sleeping soundly. As if sensing the movement beside her, her eyelashes fluttered twice, but she still didn't wake. I couldn't help grumbling to myself. She's out here scraping by all alone in this godforsaken place, and she sleeps this deeply? What's she going to do if some creep ever sets his sights on her? Even as I grumbled, I reached out and ran my hand through her soft white hair. Honestly, petting her head was addictive. I could do it 100 times and never get tired of it. Clover not only didn't wake up, she slept even more soundly, and in her sleep, she even nuzzled against my hand. A smile spread across my face, the kind an old mother might wear. Yeah, a new day, and the first thing I saw when I woke up healed my soul. Once I got in my fill, I got up as carefully as I could so I wouldn't wake her and tiptoed out of the cabin. A gust of cold morning wind hit me in the face, and I sucked in a sharp breath. I'd already toughed it out under these conditions for 2 days, and I still couldn't get used to this miserable weather. I went down to the little stream beside our base to wash my face, then walked into the shack where the angel was resting, grabbed a few wild berries to gnaw on for breakfast, and started planning out the day's work. Living off wild berries every day wasn't going to cut it. I needed to see if I could use the system to whip up some stone material and build a stove. According to the system map, there was plenty of wildlife around our base, even leopards, though those were pretty far off. I wasn't sure whether Clover could take on a leopard, so it'd be smart to keep our distance from those things while hunting. There was also that stasis pod I'd first woken up in. If I had time today, I needed to go check it out, see if it could be broken down into usable materials. Oh, and there were production tools and weapons to think about, too. According to Clover, out in the fringe world, having your base burned down and pillaged was just an everyday occurrence. I need to stock up on some of these things, just in case. Sheesh, now that I'd laid it all out, I really did have a lot on my plate today. Once I'd finished off the berries in my hand, my gaze fell on the angel lying in the shack. She was still lying there quietly. She looked like a work of art some craftsman had spent his entire life perfecting. So beautiful it was hard to look away, and my eyes kept getting drawn to her without meaning to. Still hasn't woken up, huh? Well, that made sense. Injured as badly as she was, just being alive was already a small miracle. I stepped closer, wanting to get a better look at her features. Yesterday she'd been covered in blood, and I hadn't been in any state of mind to really take her in. My gaze slowly traveled upward, past her long, graceful legs wrapped in white silk stockings, past the rise and fall of her chest, and I finally got a good look at her exquisitely sculpted face. Yeah, she was gorgeous. A pretty little nose, a pair of ice blue eyes. Looking at her made me think of the figurines I collected back home. Just gazing at her put me in a good mood. Wait, ice blue eyes. It suddenly hit me, and I froze right where I stood. At some point, the angel had opened her eyes, and now she was staring right back at me, silent, the two of us just gawking at each other. But before she'd opened her eyes, in her mind, she'd been having a dream. Lucia Electra. Faintly, hazily, someone was calling her name. She lifted her head. In a sacred, holy hall, a warm and kindly voice spoke. Congratulations. You've completed all the knowledge a qualified Malira must master. Next, you'll go to the surface for a 10-year research expedition. Only once it's complete will you truly be a Malira. A 10-year research expedition? That's right. 10 years from now, you'll be a true Malira. At that point, whether you stay on the surface or return to help build our home, that's entirely up to you. But I must warn you, the environment on the surface is brutal, and the tribes there are savage. One careless slip, and you could lose your life. During these 10 years, we won't offer you any help. Of course, you may seek aid from your fellow Malira already living on the surface. Lucia, right now, you still have the chance to change your mind. Hearing this, Lucia felt everything before her waver for an instant. And then, something inside her mind seemed to explode with a deafening boom. The sacred hall before her shattered in a heartbeat, like a mirror breaking, leaving nothing but darkness. That's right. I was supposed to go to the surface for a research expedition. Only then did Lucia realize what she'd just experienced wasn't just anything. It was a dream of something that had actually happened. So by all rights, I should already be on the surface by now, shouldn't I? What had happened? Deep in the chaotic, blurred haze of her memory, she strained to recall what had occurred after she'd reached the surface. Amid the scattered fragments, she managed to grab hold of a few pieces. Just as she'd broken through the stratosphere, right when she was about to touch down, she'd been attacked. Who had attacked her, she never got a clear look. All she saw was a single shell, striking her with pinpoint accuracy. And then, her vision went black. All that remained was the last flicker of consciousness, letting her feel her body plummeting through the air at breakneck speed. She had no idea how long she'd fallen before a tremendous crash exploded in her ears. Her insides felt like they'd been shattered, the agony driving her consciousness deeper and deeper into a fog. There was hardly a spot on her whole body left intact. She could feel it clearly, her blood, her life force, draining away fast. And just before her awareness sank completely, in the midst of the cold, she felt a warmth like nothing she'd ever known. That warmth felt like returning to the embrace of her ancestors. So, I guess I'm already dead now, aren't I? So this is what it feels like for a Malira in her final moments. So warm. Nothing at all like what a dying person should feel. A 10-year research expedition, and it ended on the very first day. I'm probably the most disgraceful Malira in all of history. At that thought, Lucia stopped thinking and quietly waited for the last of her consciousness to scatter completely, to greet true death. But she didn't know how much time passed before she realized that not only had her consciousness failed to fade, it was growing clearer and clearer. A faint sensation returned to her eyelids. She drew in a breath of air with a faint musty smell, and she could even clearly feel her chest rising and falling with it. I'm not dead. The moment the thought struck, Lucia focused all her strength, and with great effort, finally managed to pry her eyelids open. What greeted her was a wooden ceiling. It was covered in moss and looked like a long-abandoned outhouse. That's right, an outhouse. Because she noticed the room was absurdly small. Could it be I was captured by the one who attacked me? The moment the thought crossed her mind, her heart sank even colder. If she'd fallen into her attacker's hands, she'd rather have just died on the spot. She tried to lift her hand, only to find she had no control over her limbs at all. Her arms and legs felt like they didn't even exist. She rolled her eyes to look. She could see her limbs were all still attached to her body, even wrapped in plenty of bandages. But everything below her neck had no feeling whatsoever. Lucia's heart sank halfway to the floor, and it was at that moment that a sound came from outside the ramshackle room she was in. She instinctively held her breath, straining to shift her gaze downward, but she could only make out a faint figure. That figure seemed to be eating some wild berries. After finishing, the figure walked toward her, and that was when Lucia finally had gotten a clear look at the person in front of her. It was a sapiens who looked pale and clean, good-looking, even handsome, with a gentle, delicate air about him, the kind that made you let your guard down at first glance. If you slapped a pair of wings on his back, Lucia would have thought he was a male Malira. No matter how she looked at him, he didn't seem anything like those savage locals out here on the frontier worlds. He wore just a thin fiber shirt, the sleeves torn, yet a scarf was wrapped around his neck. The whole look was oddly mismatched. While she was sizing him up, the sapiens turned his gaze her way too, and their eyes met head-on. Then he just froze in place. Crap. She'd been staring too intently and gotten caught. Still, in her current state, there was no way she could keep pretending to sleep forever. The sapien snapped out of it a little, looking somewhat awkward. You're awake? I honestly didn't expect this angel to wake up right now. But seeing that she was just lying there with her eyes open, unable to move a muscle, I calmed down immediately. Looks like her injuries haven't healed yet, so she can't move for the time being. Finally, she spoke. Who are you? Her voice was cool and clear, sweet and pleasant to the ear, but I could pick up on the wariness hidden underneath right away. No matter how you looked at her, she really was exactly like an angel. I put a little distance between us, standing at just the right spot where she could see me clearly, and answered, just an ordinary colonist. I saw you fall out of the sky, so I saved you. Hearing this, Lucia quickly calculated in her head how much of it she could believe. Judging by this sapien's ragged clothes and the fact that they'd eaten wild fruit, the kind you could find anywhere, for breakfast, this colony was clearly dirt poor. By the looks of it, they might even be refugees who'd only recently crashed onto this frontier world. There was no way a colonist like this could have the kind of weapon capable of precisely striking her at high altitude. At that thought, her wariness eased a bit. Just then, a white-haired girl with a pair of mouse ears poked her head in through the doorway. Oh, the bird person's awake. Clover, you're up to? Yeah, heard some noise, so I came to check it out. Bird person? A few dark lines appeared on Lucia's forehead, and she corrected the girl irritably. I'm not a bird person. I'm a Malira. A Malira? Clover looked confused and turned to me. I shrugged. I was a refugee who'd just landed here. How would I know anything? Seeing the two of us stare at each other blankly, Lucia was stunned. You don't even know what a sky elf Malira is. We both shook our heads flatly. One of us only half understood the frontier worlds, and the other knew nothing at all, so there was nothing worth hiding here. Seeing that neither of us was faking it, Lucia let her guard down a little more. It seemed these two really had only recently become colonists. Clover asked, "What's your name? How'd you fall down here?" The angel answered right away, "My name is Anura." That's a fake name. I cut her off before she could finish. Obviously, her real name was written plain as day on the system panel, Lucia Electra. The moment I said that, Clover's little face snapped taut. Her right hand flashed, and a dagger appeared out of nowhere in her grip. The look she gave the angel now carried a hint of threat. I gently patted Clover's head to calm her, and only then did she obediently put the dagger away. The angel said helplessly, "Didn't expect you to be so cautious. In a place like this, you can't survive without being cautious." I smiled. "Relax, You can see for yourself we don't mean you any harm. Quite the opposite, actually. We're the ones who saved you. And as for the things we're asking, there's nothing really worth hiding from us, is there?" After a moment of silence, the angel sighed. "Lucia. Lucia Electra. That's my real name. Just call me Lucia." "So Lucia is your first name, and Elec whatever is your last name?" Clover asked curiously. Lucia said, "It's Electra. But sure, you can understand it that way." Lucia couldn't help feeling that this mouse girl didn't seem too bright. A couple of sentences with her, and it already left you seething. By comparison, talking with the Sapiens was much smoother and more pleasant. While Clover was doing the questioning, I mulled things over on the side. So it seemed different races arranged their first and last names in different orders. On the system panel, Clover's full name was Ivy Clover, but Ivy came first, which meant that was probably her last name. I was flying through the stratosphere when a cannon shot knocked me down. In just that one short sentence, Lucia explained the reason for her fall, without giving away a single word of anything else. Even so, I couldn't help raising an eyebrow. You're telling me you stood in the stratosphere, took a direct hit from an artillery shell with nothing but your bare body, then fell all the way down to the ground, ended up like this, and still woke up after just one day?" A trace of pride immediately crossed Lucia's face. "Of course, I'm the noble Malira. A scratch like this is nothing to me." I said nothing, so it was just as I'd guessed. This angel's body was tougher than I could have ever imagined. That started to worry me. What if this angel waited until she'd healed up, then suddenly turned on us and threatened me and Clover? Maybe, while she still couldn't move, I should just take care of the problem right here and now. At some point, Clover had slipped her dagger back out. Her eyes were locked on me, waiting for a single word from me before she'd strike. Lucia seemed to see right through the calculations running in my head. She spoke up at once. "It's true that we Malira have never gotten along with those on the ground, but we haven't sunk so low that we'd turn on someone who saved our life. Besides, a dirt-poor colony like yours doesn't have a single thing worth my interest." I rubbed my chin. "And yet, at the start, you tried to fob us off with a fake name. You can't survive out here without being careful. Those were your own words, weren't they?" Lucia gave a faint smile, but it flickered and vanished, and her expression quickly returned to calm. "As you can see, I've lost all feeling in my body. If you wanted to kill me, it'd be about as hard as killing a chicken. If I'm not mistaken," she went on, "I've come down with paralysis. It's the kind of thing you can only recover from slowly, on your own. Half a year at the least, maybe a full year, there's no telling." "Paralysis? The kind that leaves your whole body unable to move. It's probably connected to that shell that hit me. Maybe whoever attacked me actually wanted to take me alive, but you got to me first and carried me off. So right now you really are about as useful as a chicken." Clover didn't waste a second. Out came the dagger again. I quickly threw out a hand to block her. Honestly, Clover's fierceness toward Lucia caught me a little off guard. I'd assumed she was just playing bad cop to back me up. But now I could see she wasn't putting on an act at all. Turns out, all that kindness Clover showed strangers was reserved for me and me alone. I felt a warmth I couldn't quite put into words. But now wasn't the time to get sentimental. I held Clover back and turned to Lucia with a smile. "What is it you want to say? You two colonists don't actually have any real technology to your name, do you?" She hadn't even seen our colony with her own eyes. Yet just from looking at us two struggling lovebirds, Lucia had already guessed the full extent of what we had, which was next to nothing. "My mind holds a vast store of technological blueprints," she said. "If you can help me get through this paralysis, I'll give them all to you, help you build your colony up. Of course, if you find that too much trouble, you can just toss me outside and leave me to fend for myself." With that, Lucia closed her eyes. Clover understood how important technological blueprints were, but she also knew her own head wasn't built for this sort of thing, so she simply looked at me and waited for my decision. Technological blueprints. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't tempted. If this were the 21st century, fine, but this was the year 5500 AD. God only knew how advanced the technology out here could be. Sure, my useless system tossed me a blueprint every now and then, but that system was way too good at playing dead. There was no way I could stake everything on it. But still, after weighing it for a moment, I nodded. That's a very tempting offer. Lucia opened those ice blue eyes again and was about to speak. But I cut in first. "There's just one more condition on my end." Lucia swallowed the words she'd been about to say. Go on. You join our colony. I looked her straight in the eye. Once you're one of us, taking care of you becomes only natural, doesn't it? Me, a proud Malira, joining a colony thrown together by humans and ratfolk? Lucia sneered inwardly. But she also understood that in her current state, she had precious little room to bargain. So she said, fine, I'll join your colony. Yet even as the words left her lips, the system in my head didn't so much as stir. Looks like saying it out loud wasn't enough. She had to truly, sincerely want to join. That was pretty much what I'd expected, so I wasn't too disappointed. All right then. From this moment on, you're a member of our colony. We'll take care of you while you recover. Now, let's talk about those technological blueprints. Hearing that, Lucia's face. On the surface, she showed nothing, but inside, she quietly let out a breath of relief. Honestly, if these two had really made up their minds to kill her, she'd have been out of options. In truth, she could easily have used the tech blueprints as payment, getting these two to deliver her to the other Malira down on the surface. But even her own kind down there, Lucia wasn't so sure she could trust them anymore. For now, oddly enough, the two people in front of her seemed just barely trustworthy. Hearing me bring up the blueprints, Lucia said flatly, "What's your terminal code? I can transmit the blueprints from my brain to you through it." Terminal. I blanked out instantly and turned to look at Clover, only to see her shake her head too. "I don't have a terminal." "Lucia?" Question mark. Her expression finally started to crack. "You two are colonists and you don't even have the most basic terminal?" Sticking to my principle of just asking when I don't know something, I inquired humbly, "What's a terminal?" "Lucia, a chip implanted in the brain. It's a tool for sending messages and communicating with each other." "Oh, so basically it's just a cell phone. Now I got it. Except, I really don't have one of those. This system can function as a terminal. Terminal code at 251106. Just then, that deadweight system that had been playing possum finally spoke up. Hearing it pipe up, I was momentarily at a loss for words. This lousy system, no matter how I badgered it normally, it ignored me. I couldn't even figure out how many functions it had. Every single time, I had to wait until it couldn't hold back anymore before it'd cough anything up. If that's the kind of thing you mean, then I actually do have one. By this point, Lucia was already mulling over how she, someone who couldn't move a muscle, was supposed to survive after being tossed outside. If these two didn't even have terminals, then her usefulness would be about equal to that of a chicken. So when I suddenly said that, Lucia let out another sigh of relief. Probably the first time in her life she'd ever wound herself up this tight. "The way you two refer to terminals, is it just different from ours?" "Don't worry about that." I read the terminal code off to Lucia. "See if it works." Lucia said nothing and closed her eyes. A moment later, I suddenly felt my head swell slightly, as if a whole bunch of stuff had appeared out of thin air, exactly like the feeling from back when I received the blueprints from that lousy system. Aside from that, nothing else seemed off. At the same time, the system's voice rang out in my mind. "Electricity blueprint acquired. Geothermal generator blueprint acquired. Detected that host has unlocked electricity technology ahead of schedule. Acquired. Artificial seed blueprint. Corn seed ×1. Skill trainer. Farming ×1. The electricity blueprint." My eyes lit up in an instant. Seeing my expression, Lucia smiled too. "Looks like you received the gift I sent. How does it feel?" "It's a huge help, thank you." Clover looked at me curiously. "What tech blueprint is it?" Excited, I reached out and ruffled Clover's head. "It's the electricity blueprint. And a generator too. We can have electricity now." Electricity? Clover's eyes widened slightly. She understood just as well what electricity meant. And right then, Clover didn't even notice. I'd already unconsciously ruffled her head several times. Meanwhile, I ran through the contents of the electricity blueprint in my head. I discovered that the power generation equipment here was absurdly simple in design. Take cables, things that, in my memory, required all sorts of considerations about conductivity and corrosion resistance. Here, they only needed one of the most basic minerals, given a little processing, to make, and that was iron. Iron ore was hardly scarce around the colony. One scan with the system map showed several iron deposits clear as day. Processing wasn't any trouble either. The system could handle it. The generator was just as simple. But to build one that produced enough power, you needed a large quantity of parts. And right now, my only route to getting parts was a single one, tearing things apart. There was another critical problem: productivity. The colony's productivity right now was pathetically low. Lucia was a paralyzed invalid, and Clover's crafting and construction levels were both dismally low. The only one who could actually do infrastructure work was me, a one-man show. Once that little burst of joy over getting the electricity blueprint wore off, I started to get a headache. I rubbed my temples. To boost productivity, I needed to recruit more people. But here was the problem. What kind of colonist would have to be completely out of their mind to join us in this rundown place where even putting food on the table was a struggle? Food on the table? Suddenly, an idea flashed through my mind, and I snapped my head toward Lucia. Lucia, do the colonists out here in the fringe worlds ever worry about where their next meal is coming from? Lucia gave me a puzzled look, clearly not understanding why I was asking, but she answered honestly. As far as I know, only a handful of colonies with really advanced technology don't have to worry about food. Aside from those, even the ones that have mastered artificial seed technology are still living meal to meal, especially when the barren season hits and even artificial seeds won't grow. Every year, a huge number of people starve to death. That's it. That's exactly what I needed. I immediately looked at the other reward the system had just sent me. Corn seed ×1. Corn seed adapted to fringe world soil can grow organic corn. First harvest in 3 days, then every 12 days after that. The maximum growth temperature, 58 degrees. Minimum growth temperature, 0 degrees. As for that artificial seed blueprint the system threw in along with it, I ignored it completely. These so-called artificial seeds were just useless organic matter that got specially processed into something you could plant. Not only was the process a pain, but a batch of seeds could only be planted once, and the nutritional value was pathetic, barely enough to fill your stomach. I pressed further. So you're saying the fringe worlds don't have any natural vegetables at all? Of course not, Lucia said. The only food you can naturally forage here is berries. Vegetables from other planets just won't survive in this godforsaken place. Why do you think so few aliens ever bother coming out to the fringe worlds? Her expression grew more and more strange. Why are you suddenly so concerned about whether other people have enough to eat? Shouldn't you be more worried about feeding yourselves right now? It's nothing, just curious. As I spoke, I bent down and picked up a berry, then looked at her. Are you hungry? Want me to feed you some berries? Lucia froze for a moment and was about to say no. But right at that moment, her stomach betrayed her with a loud growl. After an awkward silence, a flush crept across her pretty face. Somewhat embarrassed and irritated, she closed her eyes. Have that rat person next to you feed me. Being taken care of here, getting fed by someone else, was unavoidable. But if she was going to eat, then some other things might also. The thought filled Lucia with a touch of despair. Thankfully, there was at least one female colonist in this settlement. Just as she was thinking this, Clover walked over holding a few berries. She pinched one between her fingers and held it up to Lucia's mouth. Having accepted her fate, Lucia obediently closed her eyes and opened her mouth. But she waited and waited, and no berry ever made it into her mouth. Just as she was starting to wonder, she suddenly felt something bounce off her forehead. She opened her eyes to look. It was a berry, now rolling off to the side. And Clover's little hand was still hovering in midair. Lucia stared at her flatly. Why is your hand so far away? Afraid I'll bite you. Clover said, hard to say. Lucia said, ? Clover looked completely serious. I have some experience taking care of unconscious people or taking care of corpses, but I've never taken care of a living person before, so I'm a little nervous. Lucia said, I'm basically no different from a corpse right now, so just treat me like one, okay? A corpse's mouth doesn't open and close, Clover said. Could you close your mouth first? A few beads of sweat rolled down Lucia's forehead. If I close my mouth, how am I supposed to eat? I could pry your mouth open first, put the berry in, then hold your chin and help you chew. Enough. Stop talking. A chill shot down Lucia's spine, and she instantly realized. This rat person was extremely dangerous. Letting her handle the feeding had been a colossal mistake. Not only was she a bit slow, but the more important thing was, this rat person had tried to kill her multiple times just moments ago. So Lucia turned her gaze back to me. You do it instead. Sure, he was a man, but dealing with him was at least a whole lot more comfortable than dealing with that rat person. I shrugged with a smile and stepped forward. Clover, I've got this. Clover nodded. Then I'll go gather more berries. Now she had to collect rations for 3 people. And she turned her head and glanced at the 2 mounds on Lucia's chest, silently sighing to herself. This bird person looks like she can really put it away too. Looks like I'll have to work even harder to find food from now on, she thought. Or when the barren season comes, all 3 of them are going to starve to death together. Oh, right, Clover, wait a second. The moment she heard she was about to go, I pulled the bag of corn seeds out of my system storage and handed it to her. There's an abandoned field right over there, isn't there? Try planting these seeds in it. That's right, the corn seed times 1 the system gave me wasn't a single kernel. It was a whole packed bag. As I passed it over, I stole a glance at Clover's farming skill level. Farming, level 3. Level 3 farming. That should be enough, right? Clover tilted her little head and took the seeds. Are these seeds you can eat? I nodded. Yep, corn seeds. Corn. Her thin little tail shot straight up, and her eyes started sparkling. She didn't doubt me for a second. I'll go plant them right now. With that, she snatched the seeds and dashed off. I watched her go, then turned back to Lucia. All right, lie still and behave. It's time for me to feed you. Lucia looked at me like I was an idiot. What other position could I possibly manage besides lying here? I ignored the look and stepped closer. You want me to prop you up against the wall so you can eat? No need. Just feed me like this. We Lila aren't as delicate as you Homo sapiens. I didn't argue. I just tucked some dry grass under her head to make her more comfortable. While I was doing that, I casually reached out and touched the yellow halo hovering over her head. My hand passed right through it. Oh, so the halo isn't solid. What? Are you fascinated by my halo? Lucia had noticed my little experiment. Yeah, kind of curious. Is it some kind of tech? Or are you born with it? Does it do anything? The halo is something we Lila are born with. It doesn't do anything. Just think of it as our mark, I guess. A mark, huh? I glanced at the pair of snow-white wings on her back and thought, if we're talking marks, those wings of yours are way more eye-catching than the halo. With her head propped higher, Lucia's field of vision opened up, and now she could clearly see the injuries all over her body. Most of the wounds had been bandaged. But she noticed something. Among the bandages, besides her own tattered white coat, there were also strips of blue fabric. Lucia seemed to realize something. She looked at the shredded sleeve of my blue shirt, and her eyes flickered slightly. What are you staring at? Come on, open up. By now I'd finally managed to crouch down beside her. The room was so cramped that I had no choice but to press up close against her small, soft body. Lucia obediently opened her mouth. I slipped a berry between her lips and quietly watched her chew, swallow, and open her mouth again. Why are you suddenly so cooperative? I said with a laugh. I figured you'd be firing off a couple of insults about now. You're loud. Don't tell me you're the type who gets excited when I curse at you. I shrugged. Sorry to disappoint, but no. What's there to be disappointed about? After I'd finished feeding her the berries, I clapped my hands and stood up. I've got things to take care of too. Get some rest. If you need anything, just call me through the terminal. Lucia didn't say a word. She simply closed her eyes. I was about to leave when Lucia, eyes still shut, suddenly spoke. If you don't have fabric, you can use the hides and fur you strip from hunting to sew clothes that'll keep you warm. I couldn't help turning back. Are you worried about me? You Homo sapiens are too fragile. Don't go and freeze to death on me. If you die, I won't have it easy either. From the way she said it, I could tell she didn't quite mean what she was saying. A smile crept across my face. Oh, right, I never introduced myself, did I? My name's Jiangling. That mouse girl is called Clover. Lucia said coldly. I have no interest in your names. Hurry up and go do whatever it is you need to do. I didn't bother her any further and stepped out of the little shack. As the room fell quiet again, Lucia let out a long sigh and opened her ice blue eyes once more, muttering to herself. Jiangling, huh? Even out here in the fringe worlds, that's a strange name. And what was that mouse girl called again? 4-leaf clover? 5-leaf hemp? Never mind. Can't remember. Leather, huh? Out of the shack now, walking toward the fields, I looked down at my ragged shirt and sighed. Looks like I'll have to go hunting. There was no way I could handle that myself. That kind of thing would have to fall to Clover. And it worked out well enough. Hunting meant I could bring back some meat too. At least we'd finally get to eat something other than fruit. Lost in thought, I arrived at the edge of the field, only to find Clover sprawled on the ridge between the rows, staring intently at the corn seeds she'd just buried. The sight was both exasperating and hilarious. I walked over and asked, "What are you doing?" "Waiting for them to sprout." MHM. Clover stood up and nodded with total seriousness. "I want to eat corn as soon as possible," she said. As she said this, she even raised her little hand and wiped a bit of drool from the corner of her mouth. "Staring at it like that isn't going to make it grow any faster, you know." I patted her on the head. "Come with me over to the hibernation pod. I want to see if I can break that thing down into something useful." "Okay." Clover didn't ask a single unnecessary question. She agreed without a moment's hesitation. I pulled up the system map, and we set off together. The hibernation pod happened to sit right at the edge of the map, but it wasn't too far. Along the way, we ran into quite a few small animals. Just as we were getting close to the pod, I, who'd been watching the map the whole time, suddenly frowned and threw out an arm to stop Clover. "Wait. What is it?" She looked up at me, puzzled. "Someone's here." I stared hard at the live map. Over on the far side, two little figures had suddenly appeared, and they were heading straight toward me and Clover. Alarm bells went off in my head. I lowered my voice and told her, "Hide quick." Clover nodded and slipped into the bushes beside the hibernation pod with me. We'd barely gotten settled when, sure enough, two dark-skinned men walked up to the pod. Both were built like tanks. One of them was even bulkier than me, like some kind of humanoid beast. I quickly opened the map to check their skill levels. First, the one with the bigger frame. Abalugo Naba. Race, Diran. Melee, level 9. Ranged, level 2. Level 9 melee. I glanced at the man's massive build, then at the tiny Clover beside me, and felt my scalp tighten. Then I checked the other one. Nyaka's frog. Race, Diran. Melee, level 6. Ranged, level 9. Level 9 ranged? I frowned. If he had level 9 range skill, then this guy was almost certainly carrying a gun. As for what this Diran race was, I couldn't be bothered to look it up. There were more races out here on the frontier than anyone could ever count. Right now, all I could hope was that these two were just passing through, and not some kind of bandits who specialized in raiding colonies. "Naba, look, what's this?" Just then, the two big men noticed the hibernation pod, and the one called Frog rushed forward excitedly. "It's a hibernation pod. If we take this thing apart, we can trade it for a ton of silver and buy a whole lot of food." But Naba just stared at the pod, saying nothing. Hidden in the shadows, I watched with a sinking feeling, while stealing a glance at Clover beside me. The next second, my eyes went wide. Because somehow, at some point, Clover now had a silver-white weapon in her hand. Not a knife, a revolver. Sensing my gaze, Clover turned her head and met my eyes with those golden eyes of hers. The look seemed to ask, "Should we make our move?" I opened my mouth, then finally lowered my voice and said to her, "You make the call." Honestly, until I knew whether these two were friend or foe, my plan was to hold still and wait. If all they wanted was a hibernation pod, then fine, they could have it. But after all, I was the newcomer here. When it came to dealing with strangers, it was safer to leave the judgment to Clover. Hearing me say that, Clover didn't move either. She just held the revolver steady, her gaze sharp, like a predator sizing up its prey. "This hibernation pod, it's empty." Just then, Naba, who'd been staring at the pod the whole time, finally spoke. Frog nodded. "Yeah, it's empty. So what? It means the person inside has already come out." As he said this, a savage grin spread across Naba's face. "And that means they might still be somewhere nearby. We can hunt them down, tear them into strips, dry them into jerky, and stockpile them for food." Frog's eyes lit up in an instant. "Yeah, why didn't I think of that? Naba, you're a genius. There are footprints right over here. Follow the tracks, and we might just catch them. Tear them into strips, dry them into jerky?" Hearing that, I froze for a good long while before it finally sank in. These two colonists were cannibals. In that instant, a bone-deep chill shot up from the soles of my feet straight to the top of my skull. Now there was no question at all whether these two were friend or foe. Clover tightened her grip on the revolver, ready to strike. I took a deep breath and asked her in a low voice, "How sure are you?" 100%. Hit the skinny one first. He might have a gun." Clover didn't doubt my words for a second. She nodded and slowly rose to her feet. "Russell." The bushes beside us shifted with the movement. At that sound, Frog whipped his head toward our hiding spot. "Who's there?" Even as he shouted, his hand shot toward his waist. We'd been spotted. These two were sharp. But Clover was faster. She sprang up, pulled the trigger. Bang! A sharp gunshot cracked through the woods, sending birds scattering in every direction. Frog had just gotten his hand on the grip of his gun. Before he could make another move, his whole body froze in place. Right in the center of his forehead, a bullet hole had appeared. Dark red blood gushed out of it, and in an instant, it covered his entire face. Then Frog toppled straight over, hitting the ground stiff as a board. Frog. Only when Frog dropped did Naba snap out of it. Instinctively, he looked for cover to duck behind. But no matter how high his combat rank was, going up against a gun left him with only one option: run for his life. Yet in that very moment, Clover had already slipped behind Naba like a ghost. No one knew when. She clutched the dagger tightly in her hand. She planted one foot on Naba's back, sprang up lightly, and leapt onto the back of his neck. The dagger swept toward his throat, quick as lightning. Squelch. Blood spurted out. Naba clamped both hands over his neck, mouth gaping, unable to force out anything but strangled gurgles. His eyes strained backward, desperate to see who had ambushed them. But at that instant, Clover's dagger came down again, dealing a fatal blow to the back of his skull. Blood splashed across her cold, pale little face. Naba's massive body crashed to the ground. In his final moment, all he saw was me, stepping out from the grass. As for Clover, the one who had actually ended his life, he never got a single glimpse of her, not even in death. I walked out of the grass, looking at these two grotesquely mangled corpses and the blood pooling everywhere. My stomach clenched. I knew that in the fringe world, this kind of thing was just an everyday occurrence. But actually getting used to it, that was going to take some time. By now, Clover had wiped the blood off her dagger, put it away, and come over to stand in front of me. "What's wrong? You don't look so good. I won't lie to you. This is the first time I've ever seen a dead body up close, right after someone's been killed." Forcing a faint smile onto my slightly greenish face, I crouched down and gently wiped the blood off her cheek. "You're not hurt, are you?" At my touch on her face, Clover's little cheeks flushed pink. But she didn't pull away. She shook her head. "No. One of them was combat level 12, the other level 9. Only 3 levels apart. Yet Clover had taken them both out with such ease. Clearly, you couldn't judge a person's real fighting ability just by looking at the level on their stat screen. Once I'd wiped her face clean, I felt a wave of emotion. I gently pulled her into my arms. Feeling the warmth from my chest, Clover couldn't help but tilt her head up. What's this all of a sudden?" "It's nothing," I answered. "I just suddenly realized how lucky I am that you were the first person I met. If Clover hadn't opened that hibernation pod of mine, if she hadn't brought me back to the colony, if she'd shown up just 2 days later, the first ones to open that pod would have been these two guys. And then, just like Naba said, they'd have torn me into strips and turned me into jerky. By then, no matter what kind of system I had, it wouldn't have made a bit of difference." The thought sent a chill of dread through me, and at the same time, an overwhelming sense of relief. I couldn't help holding Clover a little tighter. Clover just let me hold her. It was a long while before she said softly, "Actually, I feel pretty lucky to have met you too." If she hadn't met me, she'd still be living in that cramped, run-down shack that felt like a bathroom stall, gnawing on berries every day, getting by all alone. And who knew? Maybe one day she'd have died out in the wilderness, with no one around. She had long since made her peace with all of that. She'd even grown numb to the idea of her own death. If she died, she died. Nothing worth clinging to, nothing worth caring about. She was on her own anyway. But now, listening to my heartbeat against her ear, Clover suddenly felt that she didn't want to die. She wanted to live, really live, here in the fringe world. But why was that? After holding Clover for a good while, I finally let her go. I turned to look at the two corpses on the ground again, and this time, my heart didn't ache quite so much. But ever since I'd held her, Clover had gone quiet. She just trailed silently behind me. Then, as if she'd remembered something, she suddenly jogged over toward the two bodies. I walked up to the hibernation pod, pressed my hand against it, and silently gave the command in my mind: "Disassemble." A beam of white light instantly enveloped the pod. When it faded, there was a clattering, jangling sound, and the entire pod had turned into a pile of materials. I rummaged through it: processed iron, some kind of steel I couldn't name, some silver, and a few assorted parts. The structure was far simpler than I'd imagined. I picked up that unidentified piece of steel from the pile, held it up to the sunlight, and studied it closely. After being broken down by the system, this piece of steel had become a diamond-shaped bar, tinted a pale blue all over, looking like a chunk of cloudy glass. But the strange thing was, sunlight couldn't pass through it. And when I picked it up, it was surprisingly light. What kind of material was this? That's fiberglass steel. I was still puzzling over it when Clover's voice came from behind me. I turned to look at her, and she explained, a metal with really high hardness. She paused, then added, makes for a very sharp weapon. A weapon, huh? Too bad I didn't have a forge to make weapons with yet. It wasn't that the system's disassembly and fabrication couldn't produce a weapon, but anything made that way would only have the shape. Without proper forging, its overall strength would be questionable. All looks, no substance. I'd hold on to it for now. I set the fiberglass steel back on the pile of materials and started figuring out how to haul this whole heap back. After thinking for a while, I suddenly smacked my forehead and asked in my mind, hey, you crappy system, that system space of yours, can I use it? How could I have forgotten about this? I'd pulled plenty of things out of the system space before, but I'd never once tried putting anything into it. Currently, the system provides the host with 1 cubic meter of space. Please actively expand your colony to increase system space capacity. Please note, food stored in the system space will not spoil, but living creatures cannot be stored. Oh, come on. So unless I ask directly, you'll just keep your mouth shut no matter what. I couldn't help but curse inwardly. I felt like I was playing some garbage game with zero tutorial, the kind that kills you at every turn. Still, 1 cubic meter? That'd do. I pressed my hand against the pile of materials, focused my thoughts, and a beam of white light wrapped around the whole heap. When the light faded, the pile of materials vanished into thin air. Clover, who'd been watching the whole time, twitched her ears and asked curiously, what was that? A kind of storage technology. You could say it's part of my tech, too. Storage technology? Clover tilted her head and blinked. Then how come I never saw you use it before? My face stiffened. I coughed a couple times. I'm not that familiar with this tech yet. I only just now realized it had this function. Oh, Clover believed me, same as always, without giving it a second thought. Instead, she pulled something out and handed it to me. Jiangling, this is for you. This is... I looked closely and raised an eyebrow. What she'd handed me was a belt pouch holding a pistol, the grip still sticking out. Looked like she'd taken it off that guy called Frog earlier. I took the holster, and for the first time in my life, I gripped a pistol's handle and pulled the gun out. Yep, a jet black handgun. I couldn't name the model, but the design wasn't much different from the pistols I remembered. Same with Clover's revolver. It was already the 56th century, so why were the guns still these old-fashioned classics? Here are the bullets, too. Clover pressed a small handful of round-nosed rounds into my palm. There's not much ammo, so use it sparingly. I took the bullets, thought about my pitiful level 3 shooting skill and my zero combat experience, and nodded. Unless it came down to life or death, firing this gun would be nothing but a waste of bullets. I needed to figure out a way to improve my aim without wasting ammo. Then again, Clover really did trust me. Scrawny as I was, once I had a gun, I at least had the means to threaten her. Yet she'd handed me the pistol for self-defense without a moment's hesitation. After thinking it over, I didn't put the gun back in the holster. Instead, I stored it, bullets and all, into the system space. Clover took to my technology pretty quickly. Once I'd stowed the gun away, she asked, I've already searched those too. There's nothing else. Should we head back now? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stared at the animal markers glowing on the real-time map and started thinking. Clover, could you do me a favor? What favor? Could you hunt some game and bring it back? I asked. I need animal hide to make some clothes. At that, Clover looked over my ragged clothes and had a moment of realization. Oh, right. You can make clothes from animal hide. Jiangling, you head back to the colony first. I'll go catch one for you. Then I'll leave it to you. No problem. Even as she said it, she still escorted me out of the jungle first before turning back to go hunt. I made my way back to the colony alone. I found a spot and first dumped out the pile of materials I'd just stored in the system space, heaping them all together. After all, with only a cubic meter of space, it made more sense to save it for storing food. Then I didn't rest for even a moment. First, I found a few stones near the wooden cabin and tried using the system to disassemble and process them into stone bricks. I stacked the bricks, then processed some iron into an iron pot. Just like that, my simple cooking stove was finished. The iron pot hadn't been properly forged, so its durability left something to be desired. But hey, I wasn't planning to fight anyone with it. For cooking, it'd do just fine. The only catch was that this stove could only be used outdoors. No way was I sticking it inside the wooden cabin. With the stove done, I gathered up some wood and iron and, following the blueprint in my head, started building a sewing table step by step. I took a quick glance at the real-time map. Right now, Clover was crouched in ambush next to some kind of cow. It had bluish fur and was called a snow ox. Just from the name, you could tell it was built for the cold. Looked like she'd picked her prey carefully, which meant I couldn't afford to slack off over here either. With a blueprint and the system on my side, my progress was blazing fast. In a few hours, the sewing table took shape. I wiped the sweat off my forehead, thoroughly satisfied with my handiwork. I checked the real-time map again. By now, Clover had already taken down the snow ox and was dragging it back. And she was almost at the colony already? Clover? Dragging an entire ox? I smacked my forehead and hurried off toward her position. I hadn't gone far before I spotted her in the distance, hauling the snow ox along. I rushed over immediately, and together the two of us finally managed to drag it back to the colony. The moment we set the ox down, Clover's little face was flushed bright red from the effort. Panting hard, she asked, "This catch, is it enough?" "More than enough," I said, ruffling her hair a little apologetically. "You worked so hard. Go rest for a bit." That snow ox had to weigh at least 600 pounds. I couldn't even imagine how much effort it took her to drag it back all by herself, with nothing but her bare hands. And it was my fault, really. I'd been so focused on watching her hunt that it never once crossed my mind how she'd actually bring the prey home. Clover nodded, went back to the little shack to grab 2 berries, then came back and plopped down beside me. Munching away, she studied the stove and sewing table I'd just finished with curious eyes. I circled the massive snow ox, giving it a once-over. There was just a single bullet hole in its face. Looked like Clover had dropped it with one clean shot. I placed my hand on the ox's soft fur and silently thought the word disassemble. White light immediately wrapped around its body. So I could break it down directly? I let out a small sigh of relief. The basic workbench blueprints the system had given me actually included one for a butchering table, so I'd assumed I'd have to build that first. As the white light faded, the ox broke down exactly as I'd pictured: fur, bones, and meat, all cleanly separated. Except the ox's blood hadn't fully drained yet, leaving everything covered in red. For someone like me, who'd only recently laid eyes on a human corpse, the sight still made my stomach turn a little. The fur was still stained with blood. It would need to be washed clean and dried before it could be used for sewing. But before that, looking at the pile of beef in front of me, I grinned. "Clover, want some meat?" "Meat?" Having just finished her berries, Clover shot to her feet, eyes gleaming. "I want some." "All right." I picked up a big slab of beef. "Today we're having steak." Seasoning was, unfortunately, non-existent. The best I could do was try mashing some berries into a jam and spreading it over the meat, hoping it might add a little flavor. I lit the stove and dropped the washed steak into the pot. With a loud sizzle, the aroma of grilling meat instantly filled the air. Clover stood guard right beside the stove, swallowing nonstop. Meanwhile, inside the little shack, Lucia had been lying there with nothing to do, staring blankly at the ceiling, until the smell of grilled meat drifting in from outside reached her too. She swallowed hard and closed her eyes in resignation. These two hadn't actually forgotten there was a sick patient still lying in here, had they? Outside, as I flipped the steak, I asked, "Clover, have you never grilled meat yourself before?" By all logic, Clover definitely had the skills to hunt on her own. But the way she was acting, it seemed like she hadn't eaten meat in a very, very long time. Plus, the system panel had clearly stated that Clover couldn't do any cooking. That was what really threw me. Surely she at least knew how to grill meat, the most basic thing? Or was it something she genuinely couldn't learn no matter what? I tried hunting a few animals and putting the meat over a fire, Clover said, pursing her lips as if recalling some not-so-pleasant memory. But it always came out either burnt to a crisp or still raw. I wasted a whole lot of bullets, too. Me. Fair enough. People are just different, and there's no forcing it. Once the steak was done, I spread on the berry jam and handed it to Clover. We didn't have any utensils, But Clover didn't mind one bit. She grabbed the steak with her bare hands, plopped down on the ground, and dug in with gusto. As for me, I skewered a few pieces of beef onto wooden sticks, moved the iron pot off the stove, and carefully began roasting them over the fire. These were for the patient back in the shack. There was no way Lucia could hug a slab of beef and gnaw at it like Clover, so I deliberately made her some skewers instead. After grilling the meat skewers, I walked up to the shabby little hut and knocked on the door. "Come in." Only after hearing Lucia answer from inside did I push the door open. I'd spent the whole day getting her settled in, and the musty smell that had once filled the room was now overpowered by the fresh, sweet scent unique to a young girl. When she saw me, Lucia said helplessly, "You don't have to knock. Right now, all I can do is sleep or stare at the ceiling and meditate. It's not like I can do anything else." I smiled and asked with concern, force of habit, "Are you thirsty? Want me to give you some water? If I get thirsty, I'll call you on the terminal. Don't worry about it." Lucia felt a wave of emotion. Knocking had become a habit for him? What kind of civilized society had this guy grown up in? The fact that he'd managed to survive on the fringe worlds was nothing short of a miracle. "Look what I brought you." Smiling, I pulled out the grilled skewers. "You've got good luck, your very first day joining us, and you happened to catch us breaking out the meat." Lucia said, "If this counts as good luck, then I'd rather do without. Come on, look on the bright side. At least things aren't at their worst right now, right?" I walked over to her, grinning, and held a skewer up to her lips. "Here, open up." He even bothered to skewer it. This guy's actually pretty thoughtful. That was what Lucia thought as she parted her cherry lips, biting off a piece of beef and chewing it slowly. After swallowing, her eyes widened slightly. She asked me, "Did you add something to this?" I gave her a thumbs up. "It's jam." "I added jam," Lucia said. "Are you seriously pulling a joke that's thousands of years old?" Me. Hearing that, I couldn't help feeling a pang of loneliness. I'd cracked a joke, and nobody could catch the reference. Was this the sorrow of being a transmigrator? Feeling a little deflated, I finished feeding Lucia the skewers, then gave her a bit of water. Before leaving, I took out the piece of fiberglass I'd salvaged from breaking down the hibernation pod and showed it to her. "Take a look at this. Fiberglass. Good material. What do you want to do with it?" "A weapon. I haven't decided yet, so I wanted to hear your thoughts." "My thoughts?" Lucia stared at the fiberglass for a moment, then said, "Hang on to it for now. You can't really use this yet. Try to collect more of it. Once I've recovered, I can make you something good." At that point, she left me hanging. I didn't press her and just put the fiberglass away. "Something good, huh? That's actually something to look forward to. This time, it should be something that only exists in the 56th century, right? I'll head out then. Do you need anything else? Just let me know." I asked one more time before leaving. As for other needs, this time, Lucia didn't refuse outright. Her cheeks suddenly flushed, and she stammered, "Tchat. Me, what is it?" Lucia closed her eyes, her face full of embarrassment. "Just go outside first. Send that rat tribe girl in." "Oh, sure." Stepping out of the little hut, I found that Clover had already polished off an entire steak, leaving nothing behind. She was now lying on the ground, contentedly patting her little belly. I walked over. "How was it?" "Delicious." Clover squinted her eyes in bliss. "I've never eaten anything this good before." Looks like Clover really did have it rough before. "Can you still stand?" "Lucia wants to see you about something." "Oh, okay." Clover scrambled up and walked into the little hut. I stared at the hut, a little curious about what Lucia could possibly want, something she specifically needed Clover's help with. After a while, Clover came out carrying a bundle of stuff. Looking closer, it was an armful of dry grass. And on top of the grass sat a dress, a pair of white stockings, and a pair of white underwear. Noticing my gaze, Clover turned her head and explained, "The grass got wet, so it needed changing. The clothes are quick-dry fabric. Wash them and hang them out for about an hour, and they'll be wearable again." Me. No, you really didn't need to explain any of that to me. Now I understood why Lucia had specifically asked for Clover. After all, she had to eat too. And since she had to eat, well, certain things just couldn't be avoided. But when I was feeding her earlier, I didn't smell anything strange. Come to think of it, if even her undergarments had been taken off by Clover, then right now, inside that little hut, Lucia was... Ahem. I cleared my throat sharply and rubbed my nose, forcibly chasing the dirty thoughts out of my head. Clover looked at me, puzzled. What's wrong? Did you catch a cold? I shook my head. No, it's nothing. I've got to deal with the snow ox hide. I just took off too. Let's go together. Hom. Down by the little river, Clover was washing the clothes Lucia had changed out of, while I scrubbed the snow ox hide. I followed the babbling water with my eyes, gazing upstream, and suddenly spoke up. Since there's a river, do you think there might be another colony up there, further along? Clover shook her head. Back when I used to gather food around the colony, I explored pretty far in every direction. I walked upstream too. Never saw a single soul. So those 2 colonists we ran into today, their territory isn't actually anywhere near us. Clover nodded, but added, not near, exactly, but it can't be too far off either. Those 2 probably heard the commotion in the sky yesterday and came sniffing around this way. The commotion in the sky, of course, meant when Lucia got blasted down by that cannon shell. I fell into thought. If their colony noticed those 2 hadn't come back, they'd probably send more people to search, wouldn't they? Thankfully, before we left, Clover and I had already buried the 2 bodies. Still, as the colony kept growing bigger, it was only a matter of time before someone found this place. Once I finished sewing these clothes, I'd need to move weapon forging and tool making up the priority list. Clover finished washing Lucia's undergarments just as I got the snow ox hide cleaned up. All that was left was to let it dry overnight, and tomorrow I could use it to make clothes. As for the remaining beef, I stashed it all in the system space. Meat spoils easily, so the system space was perfect for it. With everything done, I stretched and watched the sun sinking toward the horizon, thinking, in a little while, I could finally get some sleep. Just then, an alarm suddenly rang out in my head. Warning, an unfamiliar colonist has entered the colony's territory. I froze, then quickly pulled up the real-time map. Sure enough, an unfamiliar little figure had appeared on it. The location was to the west, exactly where Clover and I had run into those 2 strange colonists earlier that day. My scalp prickled. I reached out and tapped the little figure. Devin Gunther. Race, Homo sapiens. Shooting, none. This colonist cannot engage in violent acts. Combat, none. This colonist cannot engage in violent acts. Me? Question mark. What was this guy here for? Even though his stats showed no threat whatsoever, I still decided to strike first. I turned to Clover, who was hanging up the laundry. Clover, there's a strange colonist heading our way. At those words, her lazy expression instantly turned sharp. She drew her pistol and looked at me, a flicker of killing intent in her eyes. Where? To the west. Let's go check it out. Got it. It should have landed right around here somewhere. Strange. In the jungle on the western side of the colony, a thin man with brown hair wandered about, looking like he was searching for something. The man wore a spotless white monk's robe and carried no weapons. Someone like that, wandering alone in the Rim world. Anyone could see he was practically begging to die. And precisely because of that, this man seemed all the more suspicious. After searching for a good while through the tangled jungle, the man finally found a crater, as if something had come crashing down from the sky and gouged it out. Drawing closer, he could even make out the dried bloodstains inside. This crater looks like it was made pretty recently. This has to be the spot. But where's the sky elf? Dragged off by some beast in the area? Or picked up by some colonist? Suddenly, the man heard a noise behind him and quickly spun around. There, he saw a man in a thin shirt with black hair who had appeared behind him at some point, pointing the dark barrel of a gun straight at him. Don't move. Who are you? I kept my pistol locked on him and barked coldly. Hey, I mean no harm. The man in the monk's robe hurriedly threw up his hands and spoke fast. I'm a missionary from the Skyfeather Church. My name is Devin Gunther. I came here looking for a sky elf who may be injured. I could tell this man genuinely didn't want to fight. In just 2 short sentences, he'd laid out his identity and his purpose completely. My furrowed brow eased slightly, and I lowered the pistol. The Skyfeather Church. As for the injured sky elf, he mentioned, that had to be Lucia. Was this church connected to Malira? But hadn't Malira always been on bad terms with the other races on the ground? Meanwhile, Clover was hidden in the shadows not far off, her revolver aimed at the man's head. This had been my idea. I'd step forward to negotiate while she stayed concealed. The moment he made any suspicious move, she'd immediately fire. Even though I wasn't pointing the gun at Devin anymore, he still kept his hands raised high, doing everything he could to prove he meant no harm. Friend, you must have arrived in the fringe world pretty recently, right? I stared at him coldly and said nothing. But Devon's face broke into a warm, approachable smile, without a trace of disdain for my ragged appearance. Let me introduce us. Our Church of Skyfeather is a religion that worships the sky spirits. Many years ago, we had close ties with the sky spirits, and from them we gained supreme knowledge and power. That's how we ushered in an age of glory unlike anything the world had ever seen. Sadly, the sky spirits later cut off all contact with us. But even now, we keep searching for any sign of them, begging that they might one day look upon us with favor again. At this point, Devon's expression turned fervent. He looked at me and said, "Friend, why not join our Church of Skyfeather? Once we win back the favor of the sky spirits, you too could gain knowledge that ordinary people couldn't master in 1,000 lifetimes." Stop right there. I quickly cut off Devon's sales pitch. This sky spirit you keep talking about, does it actually exist? Or have you only heard about it from others, never seen one with your own eyes? Devon's expression stiffened for a moment, but he recovered fast. The sky spirits absolutely exist. The only reason I came here this time is because our church picked up traces of one. Now he finally seemed to remember the real reason he'd come, and asked me, "Friend, have you happened to see a sky spirit anywhere around here?" According to our records, they live in the sky city of Kalido. They have pure white wings on their backs, a glowing halo floating above their heads, and a beauty so radiant it makes everything on the ground look dull by comparison. The sky city of Kalido? Lucia had never mentioned a place like that. I shook my head, my face blank. Never seen anything like what you're describing. How could there possibly be a species that looks like that? It's a big world, friend, full of strange and wonderful things. Devon gave a kind little smile. By the way, what's your name? Jiangling. Jiangling? Is that a family name or a given name? Jiang is the family name. Ling is the given name. I see. Ling, how about we exchange terminal contacts? Now that's a real missionary for you. This guy really knew how to get chummy with people and press his advantage. I glanced at his ability panel again. Social, level 10. Wow, level 10 in social skills. By now, Devon had already rattled off his terminal code. "I'm truly sorry for barging into your colony uninvited. Our Church of Skyfeather is deeply devoted to peace. Ling, please don't hold this against us." I silently thought to myself, in a lawless mess of a place like the Fringe World, is there really such a thing as a peace-loving faction? Still, Ling, I do hope you'll keep an eye out for any sign of the sky spirits. If you find one, you can contact me directly through your terminal. We'll pay you a very generous reward. There's a reward too? I rubbed my chin, deliberately putting on a face that showed I really cared about the money. Well then, I'll do my best. I'd be much obliged. I'll take my leave for now. With that, Devon turned to go, seemingly not the least bit worried that I might suddenly put a bullet in his back. He'd only taken 2 steps before he suddenly turned his head back, still not ready to give up. "Ling, are you sure you won't consider joining our Church of Skyfeather?" "Me? Thanks, but I'm really not interested." "All right." Devon looked genuinely regretful. "If you ever change your mind, contact me anytime." And with that, he walked off without looking back. Only after Devon had completely disappeared did Clover slip out from the shadows. "Was he here looking for that bird woman?" I nodded. "Lucia seems to be pretty important to them, and I get the feeling he's already starting to suspect she's here with us." "Then why didn't you just take him out?" As she said it, Clover made a throat-slitting gesture. I laughed and ruffled her hair. "Now's not the time to be making enemies everywhere. Let's head back." "Okay." The Church of Skyfeather? After Clover and I got back to the colony, she helped Lucia get dressed first. Only then did I go inside and bring up the subject of the Church of Skyfeather with Lucia. The moment she heard those words, Church of Skyfeather, Lucia's delicate brows furrowed. You've had dealings with them?" "Ran into a missionary. Seems like he was here looking for you." I shrugged. "Didn't expect you to have a bunch of fanatical worshippers like that." "Fanatical worshippers?" "Heh." Lucia let out a cold laugh. "Jiangling, if you trust me, then don't. Getting too close to the Tianyu Church. Of course I believe you. Otherwise, I wouldn't have kept your existence a secret from him just now." "Curious," I asked. "So the relationship between you and this church isn't as simple as that missionary made it sound?" Lucia didn't answer directly. She just said flatly, If they really had a way to track down Mira, then why could they only pinpoint where I crashed, but not this rundown shack I'm staying in right now? If I had to guess, that shell that blasted me out of the sky was the Tianyu Church's doing. And this paralysis I somehow ended up with? I'm sure that has everything to do with that shell too. I said nothing. In that moment, I understood completely. Keeping Lucia's existence hidden had absolutely been the right call. If that's really the case, then I actually owe you my thanks. Lucia stared at me with those ice blue eyes, and I couldn't tell what she was thinking. If you hadn't brought me back, even if I hadn't bled out by now, I'd have been dragged off to the Tianyu Church a long time ago. I felt a strange pang. Wasn't her situation almost exactly like mine, back when I'd first crash-landed in the fringe world? And me, I'd run into Clover. The thought made me smile faintly. You're one of us now, part of the colony, I told Lucia. No matter what happens, I'll do everything I can to keep you safe. Don't worry. At those words, something in Lucia's ice blue eyes trembled almost imperceptibly. Then she closed them. All right, it's getting dark. I should rest. Then I won't keep you. Get some good rest. With that, I closed the door of the little shack. But as I left, Lucia, who should have been drifting off to sleep, opened her eyes again. She stared silently up at the ceiling, and for a long, long time, she didn't close them. Year 5500 of the Common Era. The 10th day of Jade Elephant. Early morning. 2/3 of spring had already passed in the fringe world, and the weather had grown a little warmer. As usual, I got up early, walked out of my hut, splashed some water on my face, and munched on a few berries to take the edge off my hunger. Then I took down the snow ox hide that had been drying all night. Today, I could finally make myself a decent set of clothes. I planned to make a snow ox hide coat. As luck would have it, when I'd unlocked the sewing machine blueprint, the blueprints for these basic garments had unlocked right along with it. I went over to the sewing machine, laid out the hide, and got to work. I hadn't been at it long when Clover woke up too. The moment she stepped outside, she saw me sewing. Since there was nothing she could do to help, she just sat off to the side, quietly watching me work. Watching me so completely absorbed in the task, Clover found herself, without realizing it, a little mesmerized. This man was weak. So weak that Clover couldn't sense even the faintest trace of threat from him. So weak that she'd actually started to feel a little sorry for him. Someone like this couldn't possibly survive more than 2 days in the fringe world, right? That was exactly why she'd chosen to bring this man back to the colony. At first, Clover had felt pretty helpless about him. He knew nothing about the fringe world, he ate a lot, and he couldn't even chop down a single tree. His one useful trait was that he could see exactly where the berries were, which made gathering food easier for her. Oh, and there was one more thing. This man's hands were never still. He always liked to pat her head. But as the days passed, after spending a full day together, Clover started to think that this man was actually pretty reliable. He was clever. He'd gotten her into a new house. He could cook, and he could negotiate with strangers from other colonies. He'd also brought a whole new plan to the colony, giving it a clear direction to move forward. And he was so optimistic. It seemed like nothing could ever get him down. It was the kind of optimism that even Clover found herself envying. Originally, Clover had thought she'd be the one protecting Jiangling. But now, whenever she was with him, she felt wrapped in an enormous sense of safety. And that hollow, empty place inside her seemed to be filling up, little by little, with something warm. Even when Jiangling patted her head, she no longer minded. On the contrary, a faint flicker of quiet happiness would secretly bloom in her heart. This feeling was like she was truly, genuinely alive. Alive as a real living being. Not like before, when she'd been little more than a walking corpse who cared about nothing but filling her stomach. Clover? Clover. Jiangling's voice calling her name drifted over, growing closer, going from a blur to something clear, and Clover finally came back to herself. Jiangling was standing right in front of her, looking at her with a puzzled expression, spacing out in broad daylight. Didn't sleep well. Clover shook her head. No, I was just thinking about something. What is it? Jiangling gave a faint smile and held up something blue. Take a look, what's this? Clover looked closely. A scarf. That's right. What I was holding in my hands was. It was a blue scarf. I stitched this from snow ox wool. It's for you. Consider it. Payback for that scarf you gave me back then. With that, I crouched down and wound the scarf around her neck, loop after loop. Clover sat perfectly still, watching me without blinking, not moving an inch. Once I finished, I nodded, satisfied. Suits you pretty well. How's it feel? Clover quietly lifted her little hands, grabbed the scarf, and buried half her face in it. After a long moment, she murmured softly, "It's warm, even warmer than my old scarf. As long as you like it." Seeing that she did put my mind at ease, so I stood up, planning to get back to sewing my leather coat. But just as I turned to walk away, Clover suddenly reached out and grabbed my right hand, holding on tight. Puzzled, I stopped and turned back. "Clover, is there something else?" She didn't say anything. She just quietly lifted my right hand and placed it on top of her own head. Feeling the warmth from my palm, and a sense of fullness deep in her heart that she'd never known before, Clover's eyes curved into two little crescent moons, and she broke into a smile, one I'll never forget as long as I live. Bright as sunshine and just as dazzling. At the same time, she said something that left me completely baffled. "It's good to be alive." The sight of it left me stunned for a moment. When I snapped out of it, I ruffled her hair. I didn't ask what she'd really meant by those words. I just went along with them. "Yeah, it's good to be alive. Nothing's better than that. So, Clover, let's keep on living together, okay?" Hearing this, Clover froze for a second. Then she pressed her lips together and nodded hard. I kept at it until well past noon and finally got the leather coat finished. While I was at it, I made a pair of leather pants too, so the whole staying warm problem was pretty much solved. Of course, it was my first time sewing clothes, so there were bound to be some mistakes. Both the coat and the pants ended up with a bunch of patches. But hey, as long as I had something to wear, why fuss over the details? I put on the coat and pants and stretched out a bit. For a moment, I felt like a whole new person. Clover was gone by now. I glanced at the live map and saw her wandering around near the colony, probably out scavenging for junk again. So the next thing to do was forge some tools. Wait a second. Was I forgetting something? I looked up at the sun hanging high overhead, squinted, and thought for a moment. Then it hit me. I smacked my forehead. Oh no, I forgot to feed Lucia. The second the thought crossed my mind, I hurried over to the little shack, then jerked to a stop and, feeling a little awkward, knocked on the door. No answer. I knocked twice more. Still nothing. So I just pushed the door open. The moment it opened, I met a pair of ice blue eyes staring coldly at me. "I was starting to think you meant to leave me here to starve." So she'd stayed silent earlier because she was sulking at me. I scratched the back of my head, a little embarrassed. I was sewing clothes all morning and completely lost track of time. Actually, you could have just used the terminal to remind me. Lucia's face didn't change. Do I look like the kind of person who goes around begging others for things? That's a character flaw. You really shouldn't treat it like some virtue and announce it so proudly. I grabbed a few berries and went over to sit beside her. All right, don't be mad. It's my fault. Here, open up." Lucia was still holding onto her grudge. "Someone swore up and down yesterday that he'd keep me safe, and today he's already letting me go hungry. MMPH. Before she could finish, I seized the opening and, quick as a flash, popped a berry into her mouth, cutting off the rest of her sentence. Honestly, the fact that Lucia was willing to act a little petty with me actually made me kind of happy, because it showed, in its own way, that she and I had gotten a lot closer. We weren't just thrown together for mutual gain anymore, the way it was at the very beginning. With her mouth full of berry, Lucia finally stopped nagging. She chewed twice, swallowed, then obediently closed her eyes and opened her mouth, waiting patiently to be fed. The truth is, just feeding her like this every day was a pleasure in itself for me. Once she'd finished this belated breakfast, Lucia's temper had pretty much cooled off. She asked me, "Now that the staying warm problem is solved, what's your next move?" I rubbed my chin. "Build production tools. Then see if I can get a geothermal generator up and running sooner rather than later." If I wanted the colony to develop fast, getting electricity going had to move up the priority list right away. Once we had power, whether it was forging weapons or sewing clothes, everything would go twice as fast with half the effort. But just for one geothermal generator alone, the parts and materials I had on hand weren't nearly enough, not to mention the massive amount of work it'd take to actually build the thing. At the end of the day, the biggest hurdle was still productivity. Let me start by making the basic production tools, and try to gather the raw materials for the geothermal generator first. As for the parts, I'd have to wait for Clover to get back and ask if she had anything lying around that could be broken down into components. Lucia agreed with my plan to focus on developing electricity first. But she also understood exactly where my biggest problem lay. Your manpower, it's seriously short, isn't it? I nodded helplessly. There's just too much to do, and my productivity is so limited. It's giving me a splitting headache. No colony was ever built in a single day. For a setup like yours, you're actually doing pretty well. On this subject, Lucia couldn't offer much concrete advice either. All she could say was, there are actually quite a few refugees and drifters in the fringe worlds. Keep your eyes open. As long as you can fill their bellies, most of them would be willing to join your colony. I nodded. But honestly, up to now, I hadn't come across more than a handful of refugees or drifters. Then again, anyone wandering around a place like the fringe worlds probably wouldn't last more than a few days. After resting for a bit, I got up, ready to leave the rundown shack and continue preparing for the colony's development. Before heading out, I glanced around the cramped little space Lucia was staying in and couldn't help but say, how about I move you somewhere roomier? Lying motionless in a tiny spot like this, from dawn till dark, just thinking about it made me feel like I'd get claustrophobic. The shack Clover and I lived in still had plenty of room. Clearing out a spot for her wouldn't be any trouble at all. But Lucia turned me down flat, without a second thought. I think it's just fine here. It's quiet enough, hard for anyone to disturb me, and it lets me focus on my meditation. Besides, if your colony keeps developing at this rate, sooner or later you'll get visitors from other colonies. When that happens, I'd advise you not to reveal anything about me to them. I couldn't help but blink. Visitors from other colonies? Not every colony in the fringe worlds is out to destroy the others. Plenty of them send out trade caravans to do business with neighboring colonies. Lucia explained, if you happen to run into another colony's caravan, you should try to establish some kind of connection with them. If you can build a good relationship, all the better. It'll be a huge help to your future development. So even in a place as lawless as the fringe worlds, there were still trade caravans doing business. Still, any group that could put together a caravan in a hellhole like this had to be a force you couldn't underestimate. After leaving the little shack, I spent the afternoon putting together a hand-operated forge, hoping to make a pickaxe to make mining easier down the road. Since it was a hand-operated forge, the forging method was, naturally, the most primitive old-school approach. But expecting a scrawny little body like mine to swing a heavy hammer was completely unrealistic. All I could do was heat the iron until it melted, then pour it into a mold. As it turned out, just the step of melting the iron in the furnace nearly drained the life out of me. By the time the sun was setting and Clover returned cradling a handful of berries, I had finally, after enormous effort, managed to make that iron pickaxe. Looking at my finished product, I collapsed onto the ground, drenched in sweat and gasping for breath, feeling like my soul was about to leave my body. No good. I had to get an electric forge up and running as soon as possible. Otherwise, putting this much effort into forging every single tool would absolutely be the death of me. Seeing the state I was in, Clover immediately trotted over and handed me a few berries. Good work. I took the berries, gobbled them down in a few bites, let out a long sigh, then sat up and asked her, Clover, do you have anything we could take apart for spare parts? Parts? Hold on a second. Clover thought it over carefully for a moment, then walked around to the back of Lucia's little shack. Before long, she came back out from behind the shack, carrying something nearly half her own size. Jiang Ling, will this work? I took a good look. Well, I'll be. Even as a native of the 21st century, I recognized it at a glance. It was an air conditioning condenser unit. After dropping the AC unit on the ground, Clover ran back behind the shack again and started hauling out one thing after another. Discarded prosthetic limbs, mechanical parts one couldn't even name, and even, was that a little robot? Clover, hold on a sec. Looking at the mountain of junk piling up in front of me, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Where on earth did you get all this stuff? I picked it up while gathering food, Clover answered, pausing in her hauling. I figured it might be useful, so I brought it all back. I pointed to the space behind the little shack. So how'd you manage to hide all this stuff? There was such a huge pile of junk here, yet even with my real-time map, I hadn't spotted a single piece of it. Clover just tilted her head, as if the answer were obvious. I buried it, of course. I said nothing. Buried it, in the ground. I pulled up the real-time map again. Sure enough, the patch of ground behind the shack, which had looked perfectly flat a moment ago, was now riddled with holes and bumps. I turned my gaze back to Clover, and only then did I notice the dirt still packed under her fingernails. I guess it fits, doesn't it? She's a mousekin, after all. Even her habit of collecting junk was exactly like a real rat. But this pile of stuff wasn't really junk to me, not in my current situation. I stepped forward and gently patted her little head, smiling. Thank you, Clover. Clover shook her head. As long as it helps. Help was an understatement. This pile was a lifesaver. I walked over to Clover's little treasure mountain and started sorting through it. Anything that was completely useless, I broke down on the spot. And the things that might still be good for something. I picked up the little robot Clover had dug out and studied it carefully. The thing was heavy. It took both hands to lift. Overall, it was shaped like a tray, sort of like an oversized robot vacuum, but with a mechanical arm extending from each side. Maybe I could show this to Lucia, on the off chance she could fix it? By the time I'd finished breaking down everything that needed to go, the parts problem, the thing that had been giving me the biggest headache for building a geothermal generator, was finally solved. And I had Clover to thank for all of it. The only resource I was still short on now was iron. Mulling this over, I opened the real-time map. Our colony's location wasn't bad at all. To the east, there was a natural iron-rich mining zone. And not far from that iron deposit, there just happened to be an intermittent geothermal geyser, perfect for setting up the generator. But looking at the sky, which had already started to darken, I figured the mining would have to wait until tomorrow. For now, though, there was one more thing to take care of. I scooped up the little robot and, brimming with excitement, headed into the shack. I pushed the door open and blurted out, "Lucia, come check this out." Lucia gave it a single glance. A Hollerbot. But it's totaled. Scrap it. That cold splash of water instantly doused the little flicker of excitement in my chest. There's no chance of fixing it at all. The mechanical core inside is completely fried. This hauler is just an empty shell now. In the time it'd take to repair it, you could build a brand new one. Lucia said flatly. Besides, you haven't even sorted out your power system yet. Don't go worrying about machines like this. All right. I sighed and tossed the dead Hollerbot off to the side. Honestly, I hadn't really expected the thing to be of any use. It was just the first piece of technology I'd seen from this era, and I'd gotten a little carried away, like a kid seeing a giant toy. Still, the trip wasn't a total waste. As it turned out, Lucia had something to tell me. From the noise outside just now, sounds like you've gathered all the materials for the geothermal generator? The parts are all set. All I'm missing now is basic iron. I'll go dig some up with Clover tomorrow. As I spoke, I stretched. Now that I had those key components together, I felt a whole lot lighter. But Lucia's tone turned serious. Get the power system running as soon as you can. Then move weapons to the top of your list. This was the first time I'd heard her sound so grave. I couldn't help but ask, what's wrong? I just intercepted a transmission. There's a tribe made up of flame demonkin out there, burning, killing, and looting everywhere they go. 2 colonies have already been razed to the ground, Lucia said in a low voice. And that tribe's range of activity is right to the south of your colony. At those words, my relaxed expression tightened up. This flame demonkin, what kind of race are they? A bunch that only commands primitive technology, violent by nature. Their biggest trait is that they can breathe fire from their mouths. When it came to the traits of the various races, Lucia, with her intelligence stat maxed at level 20, rattled them off like she had them memorized. The 2 colonies they wiped out were both small outposts with no real defenses. About the same as our colony? I couldn't help asking. Lucia said, as bad as they were still better off than you people here. Just in terms of numbers, you're not even in the same league. I scratched my head, a little embarrassed. Fair enough. I guess I'd been overthinking it. To be honest, I wasn't even sure whether this little patch of land I had could really count as a colony. But of course, if you pick up the pace of your development now, you might actually have a shot at holding off that flame demon tribe. At this point, Lucia, who'd looked completely serious just a moment ago, suddenly flashed a mischievous grin. Then again, you could always just abandon this rundown little outpost right now and go set up shop somewhere safer. I ignored the second half of what she said entirely. You're saying I've got a chance to hold them off? That's right. Like I told you, their tech level isn't very high. The best weapons they've got are just basic firearms. I said nothing. Even the most basic firearms were way more than I could handle in my current state. Don't get so worked up. The Rim worlds have one defining trait. Danger and opportunity go hand in hand. Lucia smiled. If you decide to stay put, then once the flame demons start burning and looting, plenty of refugees are bound to come fleeing this way. And when that happens, you'll have your chance to grow your numbers. As long as your productivity can keep up, I can hand you weapon blueprints powerful enough to crush the flame demon tribe outright. Or, you could try forming an alliance with one of the stronger factions and borrow their firepower to wipe out that tribe. Forming an alliance with a powerful faction was something I couldn't even dream of right now. But powerful weapon blueprints? Now that was something worth looking forward to. The weather in the Rim worlds was often wildly unpredictable. The day had been perfectly clear, but come midnight, a heavy rain suddenly started pouring down. I lay on my wooden bed, eyes wide open, staring up at the ceiling. Sure enough, since the ceiling was made of pure wood, all that rain had it leaking like a sieve. Every so often, a drop of water would land on my face with a soft plop. For someone like me, who'd worked all day and was dead tired, it was pure torture. This house still isn't cutting it. I let out a sigh and turned my head toward Clover. She, on the other hand, was sleeping soundly, though her tiny frame was curled up even tighter than usual. I wondered how Lucia was doing right about now. The leaks in that little shack of hers had to be even worse. And on top of that, I'd taken the windows off that place. Thinking about it, I peeled off my cowhide coat and draped it over Clover. Then I grabbed the leftover pelt from the coat I'd finished sewing that afternoon and stepped out of the house. Braving the downpour, I made my way over to the rundown shack in just a few steps and slowly pushed open the door. Just as I'd figured, the leaking in this shack was far worse than in my newly built house. Rain trickled in steadily through the ceiling and the window frames, pelting down on Lucia and soaking her clothes clean through. Yet Lucia just lay there quietly. Though lying there was pretty much all she could do, her eyes gently shut, her breathing steady and even. My gaze drifted downward almost against my will. Even with the moonlight hidden behind the clouds, I could faintly make out those pale, slender legs beneath the soaked white stockings. I quickly looked away, silently apologizing in my head, and stepped carefully forward to lay the pelt over her. The fur of the snow ox was soft and warm, perfect for a blanket. I need to find time to cover up the window frames of this shack with some leather. Otherwise, with the wind blowing and the rain leaking in, it's just too rough on Lucia. If it weren't for my limited productivity and the tight timeline, I'd rebuild this whole place with stone. Once I'd tucked the blanket around Lucia, I stood up and got ready to head back to sleep. That was when I noticed two cold, ice blue lights suddenly flickered to life in the pitch-black shack. My eyes met those two lights, and I froze on the spot. Did I wake you up? No. I just slept too much during the day, so now I can't sleep at night. Lucia said coolly. This concern of yours is a bit unnecessary. We Marilla don't fear the heat or the cold. It's just a little rain. You could toss me outside to sleep, and it wouldn't bother me one bit. What a remarkable species. I chuckled. Still, getting pelted by raindrops like this has to be pretty annoying, doesn't it? No, quite the opposite. After being cooped up in a silent room for so long, the fresh breath of nature out there actually puts me a little more at ease. I said nothing. I suppose that made sense. Being shut inside too long, anyone would want to step out for some fresh air. Well then, do you want me to take the pelt away? No, just leave it. It's a kind gesture on your part, so I'll accept it. With those words, Lucia closed her eyes. Seeing that, I didn't disturb her any further. I left her with a simple good night and shut the door behind me. Good night. A long while passed before Lucia's reply finally drifted out from inside the shack. But by then, I was already long gone and couldn't hear it. Though her body had no sensation, Lucia, looking at the fur pelt draped over her, a strange warmth stirred in her heart. Lucia had always considered herself a fairly optimistic person. Take her current situation, for instance. She felt she'd fully come to terms with it. She was even, in a way, enjoying it. And the main reason she could be this happy was Jiangling. Every time that man came bursting in, all noise and questions, or dropped by just to chat because he was bored, Lucia felt a genuine, heartfelt joy, never even the faintest trace of annoyance. In fact, she even had the leisure to tease him a little. At first, trapped in this paralyzed state, all she could do was meditate, sifting through the knowledge and memories in her head. But at some point, she couldn't say when, She'd started unconsciously fixing her attention on the doorway, waiting, hoping. Any moment now, the door to this rundown little shack would swing open. And then that man would appear in the doorway, either to ask her questions, or to chat, or to do some other unnecessary thing for her. Am I just so bored that I'm this eager for someone to talk to? No, that's not it. At least, not entirely. Lucia, always so clear-headed, now felt nothing but fog inside her mind, as if some invisible thing had it clamped tight, refusing to let her think it through. So she just lay there, eyes open, staring at the leaking ceiling, listening to the wind and rain outside, awake the whole night through. The next morning, when I woke up, the rain outside had stopped. But the drop in temperature that came with it made me hunch my shoulders against the cold. I turned my head, planning to throw on my cowhide coat, only to find that the coat I'd draped over Clover was now clutched tightly in her arms as she slept. She'd even buried her whole little face in it. I covered you with that coat so you wouldn't get rained on, not so you could use it as a body pillow. I tried tugging the coat loose, but Clover's little face scrunched up in her sleep, and she only hugged it tighter. Looks like this coat had officially become her property. Fine, whatever. I gave those mousy little ears of hers a resigned rub, then left the shack. After a quick wash-up, I set off toward the colony's fields to check on how the corn was coming along. According to the system, the first harvest of these corn seeds only took 3 days, and today was already day 2. The moment the fields came into view, the sight of all those lush green corn stalks stretching across the ground, I froze in place, even though I thought I'd been prepared for it. I rubbed my eyes to make sure I wasn't seeing things, then hurried forward and stood beneath the stalks, which towered a good head taller than me, to inspect the crop. The husks were bright green, the ears plump and full. And there was one more thing I could confirm. Crops in the Rim world didn't suffer from pests. A grin spread across my face. Finally, a stable food source. After checking the corn, I headed back to the shack in high spirits, planning to fry up some beef to celebrate. But after a full night of heavy rain, my open-air stove was useless, and the wood I used for fuel wouldn't light. Well, guess it's back to gnawing on berries like a good boy. I choked down a few berries to take the edge off my hunger, then walked over to the little shack where I'd set up Lucia, ready to feed her. The instant I pushed the door open, my eyes met Lucia's. She was awake. And then, the very next second, she quickly looked away. Me? Question mark. I stepped forward, unable to help asking, did I do something wrong? Why would you ask that? Just now, you looked like you didn't want to see me. No, it's nothing, I just... Realizing what she'd done on instinct, Lucia fumbled for words, then finally just said, yeah, I don't want to look at you. Even Lucia herself didn't understand why she'd instinctively wanted to avoid meeting Jiang Ling's eyes. Was it guilt? Or was she unconsciously trying to deny some thought that had bubbled up inside her? Once again, Lucia's thoughts tangled into a hopeless knot. I let out a mournful sigh. This is the first time in my life I've worked myself to the bone for someone, and in the end, I still get treated like a nuisance. That's enough out of you. I plopped down beside Lucia, then reached out with a grin and brushed her bangs aside, pressing my palm to her forehead. All right, you've been so out of it. Don't tell me you actually caught a chill last night. Cool to the touch. No fever, then. And, wow, Lucia's skin is really smooth. But if I gave her cheek a pinch, it'd be super springy. Still, if it wasn't sickness, could it really be that lying in this shack so long had left her feeling down? Lucia fixed me with a pair of dead fish eyes. Are you done touching? Belatedly, I yanked my wandering hand back. He gave a dry laugh. Guess you don't have a fever after all. That's a relief. I already told you. We Malira don't fear heat or cold. Right. The noble Lady Malira is immune to all illness. So then, please allow me to serve breakfast to the bedridden Lady Malira. As I spoke, I picked up a berry. Here, open wide. My whole coddling a child routine actually made Lucia, who normally kept every emotion off her face, puff out her cheeks in a pout. Seeing Lucia make such an uncharacteristic, almost girlish expression, I froze in place for a moment. What's wrong? Aren't you going to feed me? Clearly Lucia hadn't realized the face she'd just made without thinking. Seeing me stall, she started urging me on. All right. I snapped out of it and started feeding her the berries. Once I finished with Lucia, I stepped out of the cabin. By now Clover was awake too, standing outside the ramshackle house clutching my leather coat, her little face flushed red. Looks like she'd realized what she'd done last night, too. I gave a faint smile, said nothing about the coat, took it from her, and pulled it on. Let's go, Clover. Time to go mining. Clover nodded hard. Let's go. We left the colony and headed east. After walking a while, the weeds along the roadside gradually thinned out, and a massive rock wall rose up in front of Clover and me. I say rock wall, but from the real-time map I could tell it was actually one enormous, regularly shaped boulder. It was like some kind of meteorite had smashed into the ground and, after countless years of natural weathering, ended up looking like this. And inside this meteorite, as luck would have it, was a huge deposit of iron ore. I loosened up my muscles, swung the pickaxe, and slammed it into the rock wall. Time to dig. Half an hour later, out of stamina, I tossed the pickaxe aside, slumped to the ground, and sat there panting. I was completely spent. Before I got transported here, I'd been a promising young guy who spent 2.5 years in civil engineering, crawling around construction sites day in and day out. My stamina was actually well above average. But the moment I arrived in this world, all that hard-earned endurance dropped to zero. My arms and legs were as thin as sticks, and with poor nutrition on top of that, I was gasping for breath after just a couple of steps. Did I really sleep in that hibernation pod for over 3,000 years? Watching me, Clover quietly walked over and picked up the pickaxe. Then she stepped up to the iron ore cluster and raised the pick. Clang! A crisp sound rang out, and a chunk of iron ore dropped to the ground. Then Clover adjusted her stance and lifted the pick again. Clang, clang, clang. In an instant, the pickaxe in her hands became a blur of afterimages, the clang, clang, clang sounding just like a blacksmith at work, and one chunk of iron ore after another came clattering down at her feet. I stared, dumbfounded. Oh, right. Clover's mining experience was at level 5. But still, only level 5. And she was already this good? I glanced at my own construction level, level 10. Why did it feel like my construction skill wasn't all that impressive? Still, with Clover's help, I was free to handle other things. First, I picked up a chunk of iron ore I'd just dug out, and tentatively said, decompose. A flash of white light wrapped around the ore. When it faded, the iron ore in my hand had turned into a block of pig iron and a pile of stone scraps. It worked. My face lit up. Now I could even skip the smelting step. Another neat little trick to boost productivity. Next up was the geothermal generator. I stood up and opened the real-time map. In the Rim world, geothermal generators had to be built on top of intermittently erupting geothermal vents, and as it happened, there was one nearby. I called out to the busy Clover, then followed the real-time map and quickly found the geothermal vent. I say vent, but it was really just a hole in the ground, about one size bigger than a sewer opening. I took a couple of steps forward, wanting to get a closer look, when the hole suddenly blasted out a jet of white steam, and a wave of heat hit me square in the face. That's a bit dangerous. If I got too close, I'd probably get cooked, right? Luckily, building a geothermal generator didn't require sticking to the thing the whole time. Keeping some distance from the vent, I sat down on the ground and, working from the blueprint in my head, started fiddling with the main components of the geothermal generator using the system's decompose and craft function. Building this thing was way harder than building a wooden house. I had zero experience, so all I could do was follow the blueprint one step at a time. First, I put together the internal parts, then assembled the overall framework. Just those 2 steps were enough to keep me puzzling away for days. And so, without even realizing it, I spent the whole morning by the vent working on parts. Because the dimensions of each part had to be joined and adjusted through repeated trial and error, that process alone wasted a fair amount of iron. By the end, my brain finally just couldn't. He moved, tossing the part in his hand aside, and flopped down onto the ground. Rubbing his temples, he groaned. Man, if only this stupid system had a feature where you could just pile up all the raw materials in one spot and generate a building with a single click. How great would that be? Of course, the system gave no response. Guess it didn't have any hidden feature like that. Looks like I've got to piece everything together myself, bit by bit. Lying on the ground, I glanced blankly up at the sun hanging high in the sky, then suddenly startled. Before I'd even realized it, it was already noon. I wondered how Clover was doing over there. Snapping back to attention, I quickly got up and hurried over to where Clover was. When I finally spotted her, She was sitting off to the side, resting, tiny beads of sweat still dotting her little face. Beside her, the iron ore was piled up like a small mountain. And looking at the spot where she'd been mining, she'd already dug out a pit big enough to fit a whole person. That kind of efficiency was seriously impressive. I quickly walked up. "Clover, you've worked so hard." She shook her head and gave a faint smile. "As long as I can help you, it's worth it." She was still a little out of breath as she spoke. Seeing that, I felt a pang of tenderness and ruffled her hair. "You must be hungry, right? Let me go find some wood. How about we have some grilled meat for lunch?" Grilled meat. The moment she heard meat, Clover instantly perked up. "Yes, let's have grilled meat." All right, I got right to it, gathered some wood nearby, and built a campfire on the spot. Then I pulled some beef and berries out of the system's storage space and started grilling. Clover didn't know how to grill, so all she could do was sit off to the side, watching me work with hungry, hopeful eyes, waiting to be fed. That suited me just fine. After all, she'd spent half the day mining. She deserved to rest and wait for her meal, no problem at all. Meanwhile, about a kilometer south of where Clover and I were, deep in the forest, a team of 4 colonists was stumbling forward, slowly making their way through the woods. Looking closely, all 4 of these colonists shared the same features as Clover: fluffy, oversized ears, thin rat tails trailing behind them, and small, delicate frames. And every one of them was injured to some degree. One of them, a short-haired ratkin with golden hair, was covered in blood and unconscious, being carried on the back of another ratkin with flaxen-colored short hair, who pressed forward with great difficulty. Leading the group was a ratkin with long, flaxen hair. She strained to push aside a patch of brush and said through gritted teeth, "Everyone, hang in there a little longer. We're almost out of this jungle." "Sister Almond." The short-haired flaxen ratkin's face was full of despair. "Even if we make it out, then what? At this pace, it'll take us at least a whole month to get back to Cusco. And Walnut, she doesn't have much time left." As she spoke, she shifted the wounded one on her back, and by now, she could already feel the warmth of the body pressed against her back growing colder and colder. Hearing this, the ratkin named Almond pressed her lips tight and said in a hoarse voice, "Once we're out of the jungle and can see farther, we might be able to find another colony. When that happens, we'll figure out a way to get help. Mignonette, whatever you do, don't leave Walnut behind." "I know." Mignonette clenched her teeth. Damn it. If it hadn't been for those flame fiends. Almond could only sigh. They had originally been a merchant caravan from an outpost called Cusco, which fell under the Edelweiss Kingdom. On their way south to trade, they'd run straight into a band of flame fiends who burned, killed, and looted like they'd gone completely mad. Their goods were stripped clean. More than half the caravan was killed or wounded, and now these 4 were the last survivors. No. Soon, it would be down to just 3. Among these 4 ratkin, there was one who was especially tiny. Ratkin were generally petite to begin with, but this one stood a full head shorter than the others. Jet black hair, a little face smudged with dirt, looking for all the world like a small child. From beginning to end, this little ratkin had simply followed silently behind Almond, not saying a word. Almond clenched her teeth and pushed aside another patch of brush. This time, the view suddenly opened up. A flat, sprawling plain stretched out before her eyes. And in an instant, she spotted it. Up ahead, a wisp of pale smoke was curling into the air. "There's someone." At the sight, Almond was so overcome that she nearly burst into tears. Thank goodness. Mignonette, stepping out right behind her, saw the wisp of smoke too, but she furrowed her brow. "Sister Almond, what if whoever it is turns out to be hostile? Or a vicious colonist? Hostile or not, we've got no choice but to try." As she said this, Almond glanced at the wounded, unconscious Walnut on Mignonette's back. Walnut had gotten hurt protecting her, after all. "Let's go. When we get there, I'll do the talking." "It's done. Here." I finished grilling a beef skewer and handed it to Clover. She took it and immediately started devouring it, her little face practically glowing with happiness. Watching her eat like that, my own appetite started to kick in too. Just then, I suddenly frowned and stood up. "Clover, hold on a second. There's a group of colonists that just showed up near us." The moment she heard that, Clover's blissful expression vanished. She shot to her feet, murder flashing in her eyes. "Where?" "To the south. Let me see, it's for ratfolk." "Ratfolk?" Clover tilted her head. What kind of rat folk? Let me check. I tapped one of the rat folk on the live map to pull up their info. Bauhinia, Almond. Race, Snow Rat Folk. Marksmanship, level 5. Melee, level 3. Snow Rat Folk. I pulled up the panel for another one of them. Bauhinia, Mignonette. Race, Snow Rat Folk. Marksmanship, level 6. Melee, level 10. Snow Rat Folk. Is that a branch of your rat folk? Clover nodded. Snow rat folk are one type of our kind. Most of them live in the frozen regions. And they've built a rat folk kingdom up in the north. It's called the Edelweiss Kingdom. It seemed Clover knew quite a bit about rat folk matters. I was still watching the live map. From the looks of it, those rat folk had spotted the smoke from our fire and were heading straight toward us. And among the 4 of them, one seemed to be injured. I couldn't help but recall what Lucia had told me the day before, that under the raids of the flame demons, plenty of refugees would inevitably flee in my direction. And this was exactly my chance to expand my numbers. At that thought, I took a deep breath. Clover, how do ratfolk usually treat unfamiliar colonists? Ratfolk are generally pretty friendly toward strangers. Unless they're attacked, ratfolk don't usually go picking fights with other colonies, Clover explained. There are enough of us in the fringe world, and we have enough territory, so our appetite for invasion and war isn't very strong. I see. I nodded. Clover, I want to make contact with these rat folk. Okay. Without a shred of hesitation or doubt, Clover immediately drew her revolver from her coat. I'll protect you. That unwavering trust of hers warmed my heart. I'm not going to just rush over recklessly, though. Better to be cautious. Once I stopped mid-sentence, because I saw the 4 rat folk suddenly come to a halt. Then the one named Almond began walking toward us alone. Seeing this, I smiled faintly. Looks like I don't need to go to them after all. They've come to us on their own. Clover, ? Just as she was looking confused, she suddenly spotted, off in the distance to the south, the figure of someone with long flaxen hair coming into view. Almost on instinct, Clover raised her revolver and aimed it at the stranger. The other party seemed to notice Clover's movement and immediately threw both hands up, signaling that she meant no harm. I gave Clover a smile and gestured for her to lower the revolver, then stepped forward to greet the newcomer myself. Clover blinked, then quickly fell in beside me. Watching this from a distance, Almond quietly let out a breath of relief. Doesn't look like they're vicious colonists, thank goodness. And to think this colony actually has a rat folk among them? A sense of kinship stirred in Almond's heart. After walking a bit farther, Almond and I finally came face to face. I studied her closely. She was about the same height as Clover, with a head of long flaxen hair that looked just as fluffy and soft, the kind you'd probably enjoy running your fingers through. Meanwhile, Clover's eyes carried a hint of scrutiny as she looked at Almond. Even with one of her own kind, she kept her guard up. At the same time, Almond was sizing up me and Clover. A very clean-looking human. So clean he hardly seems like a colonist at all. Good-looking too, and he gives off a gentle vibe. And that white-haired rat folk beside him looks a little… Almond suddenly froze. Noticing this, I spoke up first. Something wrong. She snapped back to attention. No, it's nothing. Hello, my name is Almond. Her voice was a little hoarse, as though she hadn't gotten a proper rest in a long time. I nodded. I'm Jiangling. What brings you here? We need help. Almond didn't beat around the bush. She could tell I was the leader here, so she pleaded with me directly. We're a caravan from the Edelweiss Kingdom. We were attacked by flame demons on our way south. One of my companions is badly wounded and could die at any moment. We'll die. As she spoke, Almond pressed her palms together, her black eyes blinking earnestly. So it really did have something to do with the flame demons. Strangely enough, I found myself feeling grateful to those flame demons. So, you need our help treating your wounded? Yes. Almond nodded hard. We're hoping we can rest and recover in your colony for a few days. Once our injured are healed, we'll leave right away. Of course, we'll pay you accordingly. We don't have any money on us right now, but we'll do whatever you ask. Please, just a few days of rest, huh? I felt a slight pang of disappointment. It would be great if they were willing to stay in the colony. Still, maybe if I put in a little effort, I could poach a few of them. And besides, they'd do anything? The first thing that came to mind was the geothermal generator I still hadn't managed to set up. What perfect timing. After a brief moment of thought, I said to Almond, first, hand over all your weapons to me. Then bring the wounded over here. Almond had no objections to my terms. She turned and went back to rejoin her companions. A moment later, the whole group of mice came to stand before me. Almond stepped forward and laid all their weapons on the ground, including their self-defense daggers. Here are all our weapons. Do you need to search us? After all, they truly had nowhere left to turn. The road ahead was long, food was scarce, and their companions were gravely wounded. Since death seemed certain either way, they figured they might as well pin all their hopes on this seemingly kind stranger of a colonist. I looked over the weapons Almond had produced: 2 crossbows, 3 small knives, and some crossbow bolts. No firearms at all. Stowing the weapons into my system space, I told Almond, no need for a search. Go ahead and bring your wounded over. Watching how I stored the weapons, Almond's dark eyes flickered slightly. What kind of storage technology was that? Among the group of mice, one with the same hair color as Almond, but with a much sharper, fiercer look about her, stepped forward. She slowly lowered the blood-covered, blonde-haired mouse from her back onto the ground, her voice carrying a trace of reluctance. Please. I studied this sharp-featured mouse with curiosity. At first, I'd assumed she was just a delicate-looking male mouse. But the moment I heard her voice, I realized, so this mouse was a girl too. So what exactly do the male mice even look like? To this day, I still hadn't met a single male mouse. This mouse was named Redbud Woodruff, sharing a surname with Almond. Were the two of them sisters? Woodruff noticed me examining her and immediately shot me a glare. You. But as soon as the words left her mouth, she remembered she was the one asking for help, and her sharp tone instantly softened. What are you looking at me for? I answered casually. I'm just a little curious. Are you and Almond sisters? Woodruff nodded. My name's Woodruff. I'm the 7th child in the family. Almond's 2 years older than me. She's the eldest. Huh. 7th? 7 kids in 2 years? Well, I suppose that's what you'd expect from the mouse folk. Grr. While I was talking with Woodruff, I suddenly heard a small growling sound, a stomach rumbling. I couldn't help but pause. Woodruff lowered her head and said quietly, the whole way here, all we've had to eat were a few berries. Everyone is starving. Hearing this, I gave a small smile. I pulled a few berries out of my system space and handed them to Woodruff. Right now, berries are all I can offer too. Here, take these to tide you over. Thank you. Woodruff murmured her thanks, then took the berries with a blush and started eating with her head down. Smiling, I ruffled Woodruff's flaxen-colored short hair. Not as soft to the touch as Clover's hair, but not bad either. Maybe it was because she was a snow mouse, soft and fluffy. Woodruff didn't seem to mind me patting her head. She just kept her head down and nibbled on the berries. Just then, I felt someone gently tug at the hem of my clothes. I looked down to see a mouse even tinier than the others, tugging at my clothes and gazing up at me. Her little grayish face had very childlike features, and her long black hair had leaves and twigs caught in it. Was this a mouse child? The mice were already like little girls to begin with, so what did that make this one? A little girl among little girls? The tiny mouse gazed up at me for a good while. Finally, as if working up all her courage, she said in a childish voice, I'm hungry too. As the youngest in the caravan, she had always tried her best not to be a burden to anyone. Just now, she'd stayed hidden behind everyone else, never uttering a word even as her stomach shrank with hunger. But after seeing me give Woodruff berries and pat her head with a smile, she started to feel that maybe this human male was gentle. He wouldn't hurt her. That's why she'd finally worked up the courage to come talk to me. Here, without a word, I pulled out a few more berries and handed them to the little mouse girl. She thanked me, took the berries, and immediately started wolfing them down. She really must have been starving. I crouched down and asked her, "What's your name?" Raspberry, the little mouse girl mumbled between bites. While I was busy getting on the good side of these mouse folk, Clover, the one with the most medical training among us, was examining the injuries of the wounded one, Walnut. After some effort bandaging up several of Walnut's more serious wounds, Clover turned to the frantic Almond and said, "The wounds are badly infected. We need to get her back to the base for treatment right away, then let her rest. There's no time to waste. Let's move." Before Almond could say anything, I walked over, having finished feeding Raspberry. "Take her back to the colony right now. A mouse's life is on the line. Don't waste a second." Clover nodded. "Got it." In the end, being the biggest of the group, I was the one who carried Walnut on my back as we all hurried toward the colony base. Walnut weighed almost nothing. With her on my back, I could barely feel her at all. When Almond and the others actually stepped into the base that Clover and I called home, they looked stunned. This was a colony? One decent-looking wooden house, a rundown little shack barely bigger than an outhouse, and a patch of cornfield. And then, that was it. On top of that, the entire colony consisted of just 2 people, me and Clover. That said, none of the mousefolk harbored any bad intentions. Toward colonists who had helped them, mousefolk were always kind. We laid Walnut down on the only wooden bed in the colony, and Clover immediately gathered medicinal herbs and got to work treating her wounds. The rest of us squatted outside the cabin so we wouldn't disturb Clover. After about an hour or so, Clover came out of the cabin. The wounds are mostly taken care of. Thank you so much. Almond clasped her 10 fingers tightly together and bowed to Clover. Please, you have to save Walnut. Thank you, truly, from the bottom of my heart. I can't make any promises. Her constitution wasn't great to begin with. Whether she pulls through is up to her now. That's fine, Walnut is tough. On this point, Almond seemed completely confident. Then she should be all right. Clover nodded, then glanced over at me. Her job was done. Negotiating with strange colonists was something I needed to handle. I stepped forward and said to Almond and the others, all right. According to the deal we agreed on, you'll be staying here to help out for the next few days. Almond nodded. We won't leave until Walnut recovers. What do you need us to do? There's plenty for you to do. But first, I pointed at the cabin behind me. As you can see, our colony only has one house at the moment. If you want a place to sleep, I'm afraid you'll have to build one yourselves. Mignonette glanced over at the little rundown shack nearby and said quietly, actually, we could just squeeze into that shack. That shack is off limits. I shot her down without a moment's hesitation. I'd appreciate it if you didn't get curious about that shack and definitely didn't try to peek inside. Seeing how serious my expression was, all 3 of the mice nodded frantically. A chill even ran down their spines. Was there something terrifying hidden in that shack? Don't worry about the house. Almond spoke up again. If it's just one place we can sleep in, we can have it done in a day. Good, I nodded. If you need building materials, just come to me. I can provide basic stone or lumber. The 3 mice sat obediently, listening carefully to my instructions. Once you've finished building the house, I'll have other tasks for you. But before that, I paused there, then gave a slight smile and pulled a large slab of beef out of my system inventory. You're all hungry, right? Tonight, we eat beef. Meat. The 3 mice's eyes lit up instantly, practically drooling. Ever since they'd been attacked by the flame demons, they hadn't had a full meal in days. Every single day, it was nothing but roadside berries, and more berries. Forget about meat. Wiping the drool from the corner of her mouth, Almond actually looked a little embarrassed. Honestly, we'd be fine with just a little something to fill our stomachs. You don't need to treat us this well. The truth was, the labor I'd always craved was the cheapest thing in the fringe world. Food, on the other hand, was precious. Plenty of wanderers worked themselves to death for other colonies. Just a day earlier, they'd been struggling just to scrape together enough for the cheapest ration paste to eat. The way Almond saw it, I'd taken them in, treated their wounds, and even fed them meat, while all they had to offer in return was manual labor. In his eyes, it was a wildly lopsided deal. I didn't know the first thing about these unspoken rules of theirs. But even if I had, I wouldn't have cared one bit. Can't work hard on an empty stomach, right? Come on, lend a hand. Let's get a fire going and make some food. With their desperate situation finally easing up, Almond and his group were in high spirits. Before long, they had a fire crackling and meat roasting over it. After a few bites of beef, Almond acted like he'd had one too many drinks, one hand tugging Mignonette, the other pulling Clover, and right there in broad daylight, he started belting out a song by the campfire. Almond's voice was a little raspy, but overall it had a certain charm to it, something appealing. His singing, though, was another story entirely. It was downright painful to listen to. Clover didn't show any impatience, but the look on her face said she'd resigned herself to enduring it. I quietly tended to the meat over the fire, smiling as I watched them sing. This was the first time the colony had ever felt this lively. That's when I noticed little Raspberry sitting by the fire. She wasn't eating any meat. Instead, she was clutching a handful of berries meant for a side dish. nibbling at them in tiny bites. Not going to have any meat? My voice startled her, and she shrank her neck in. But once she realized it was me, she let her guard down and murmured, "Meat is precious. For a little colony like ours, actually, we've got more beef than we can eat. If nobody eats it, it'll all just go to waste." Though, to be fair, meat stored in the system space never spoiled. Smiling, I held out a skewer of freshly grilled beef to her lips. "Here, go on and eat. Growing kids need to eat plenty." Raspberry eyed the skewer near her mouth, hesitated for a moment, then gently opened up and took a tiny bite. She chewed for a while, and then suddenly bowed her head. Her small frame began to tremble slightly. I tilted my head. "What's wrong?" "It's good," Raspberry answered softly, a faint catch in her voice. Then she took the skewer from me and dug in, eating in big, eager bites. I just smiled faintly and ruffled her black hair. "Looks like Raspberry's really taken to you." Seeing this, Mignonette, who'd finally managed to wriggle free from her older sister's grip, came over and spoke up. "Raspberry's a really good kid. So good it breaks your heart. Ever since the caravan got attacked, she hasn't cried or fussed once. She doesn't complain even when she's hungry, and whenever she eats, she only takes the tiniest bit. Also, she won't be a burden to us." Curious, I asked, "Among your mouse folk, is it normal for a child her age to travel with a caravan and do trading?" Mignonette nodded. "It's not like it is with you sapiens. When we mouse folk have offspring, it's usually 3 or 4 at a time. With such a large population, food is always in short supply. So a lot of mouse folk children have to start pitching in with colony work early. There are even plenty of kids younger than Raspberry who have to leave home and go work in other colonies just to barely feed themselves." Hearing this, I couldn't help but fall into thought. By Mignonette's account, there had to be a great many mouse folk in their colonies who couldn't fill their bellies. The colonies simply couldn't support that many people. In fact, they'd probably be glad to see some colonists leave, if only to ease the food shortage. Maybe the productivity bottleneck in my colony could find its breakthrough with the mouse folk? If I stockpiled enough food, then went over there and announced, "I'll keep your bellies full," wouldn't they come flocking to me? But what if someone with bad intentions caught wind of it, came to raid my colony, and plundered my grain? What then? It seemed the first thing I needed to do was make sure I had enough strength of my own. Once the hearty lunch was over, Almond and his group didn't slack off in the slightest. They immediately set out to find suitable stones, planning to turn them into building materials for houses. Even little Raspberry joined the construction crew, and she was surprisingly quick and nimble at it. Almond hauled over a slab of marble, set it down at the clearing they'd chosen, let out a long breath, straightened up, and wiped the sweat from his forehead. Watching from nearby, I walked over and pressed my hand against the marble he'd carried in. Seeing this, Almond figured I was just curious about the stone, so he explained with a smile, "Marble's pretty strong, and it makes for good-looking houses too. It's great building material." I didn't respond. Instead, a single thought stirred in my mind: decompose. A flash of white light instantly enveloped the marble slab. When the light faded, the irregular chunk of marble had transformed into a neat pile of stone bricks laid out on the ground. Almond's jaw dropped. He stood there stunned for a good while before looking at me in excitement. "What was that?" "That's incredible. Just a minor little feature in our technology, nothing worth mentioning," I said casually. "If you've got any stone that needs processing, just bring it to me and I'll break it down into building material for you." How is that a minor feature? With technology like this, you could skip the whole stone-cutting step entirely. The amazement in Almond's eyes hadn't faded one bit, and those 2 little mouse ears of hers kept twitching. "Jiangling, the infrastructure on your home planet must be absolutely incredible.